Thank you, Mr. Hegseth. Senator Warren.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Mr. Hegseth, thank you. Thank you for your service. So if you're confirmed as Secretary of Defense, you will oversee our military, including about 250,000 women who currently serve on active duty in the Army, the Navy, the Air Force, the Space Forces, and the Marines. And I have serious concerns that your behavior toward women disqualifies you from serving in this role. Now, I've been trying to get answers from you for quite some time on this. You haven't wanted to meet or to answer any of my questions, so we'll just have to do it here and dive in. I want to pick up on some of the questions asked by Senators Shaheen and Gillibrand and Hirono, and I just want to make sure we have a list of some of the facts that I think are undisputed. I'm not going to talk about anonymous sources. I'm just going to quote you directly. We've got the video. We've got it in print. So going back to January 2013, you told a Fox News interviewer that women in the military simply couldn't measure up to men in the military, saying that allowing women to serve in combat roles would force the military to lower the bar. You picked up on that same theme in 2015, making remarks on Fox News, referring to women in combat as, quote, it would erode standards. June 2024, you said on Ben Shapiro's podcast, quote, women shouldn't be in combat at all. And then, of course, we've talked about it in 2024. You published a book, and you say on page 26 of your book, we need moms, but not in the military, especially in combat units. Page 48 of your book, you claim that women should not be in combat roles because men are distracted by women. And then 10 weeks ago, you appeared on the Sean Ryan show and said, I'm straight up just saying we should not have women in combat roles. Now, I presume you recall making all these statements?
Senator, I'm not familiar with the article you're pointing to in 2013, but it underscores my argument completely, because in that 2013 argument, I was talking about standards.
No,
standards are what it's always been about,
Let's not
Senator.
have this same fight again.
Always been about Senate
I've quoted
standards.
you directly. We've got the video. We're happy to show it. But I want to be clear here. For 12 years, you were quite open about your views, and your views were consistently the same. Women are inferior soldiers, sailors, Marines, airmen, and guardians. And in case anyone missed the point, and these are your words from 10 weeks ago, women absolutely straight up should not be permitted to serve in combat. And I notice on each of these quotes, those are said without qualification. It's not by how much you can lift or how fast you can run. They don't belong in combat, period, or your words, straight up. And then on November 9th, 2024, just 32 days after your last public comment saying that women absolutely should not be in combat, you declared that, quote, some of our greatest warriors are women, and you support having them serve in combat. Now, that is a very, very big about face in a very, very short period of time. So help me understand, Mr. Hegseth, what extraordinary event happened in that 32-day period that made you change the core values you had expressed for the preceding 12 years?
Senator, again, I very much appreciate you bringing up my comments from 2013, because for me, this issue has always been about standards. And unfortunately, because of some of the people that have been in political power for the last 4 years, priorities other than standards, lethality, and meritocracy have driven decision-making.
I'm quoting you from the podcast. Women shouldn't be in combat at all. Where is the reference to standards, that they should be there if they can carry, if they can run? I don't see that at all, Mr. Hegseth. What I see is that there's a 32-day period in which you suddenly have another description about your views of women in the military. And I just want to know, what changed in the 32 days that the song you sang is not the song you come in here today to sing?
Senator, the concerns I have and the concerns that many have had, especially in ground combat units, is that in pursuit of certain percentages or quotas, standards have been changed. And that makes the combat more
No,
difficult
let me make a
for everybody
suggestion
involved.
about what happened in that 32 days. You got a nomination from President Trump. Now, I've heard of deathbed conversions, but this is the first time I've heard of a nomination conversion. And I hope you understand that many women serving in the military right now might think that if you can convert so rapidly your long-held and aggressively pursued views in just 32 days, that 32 days after you get confirmed, maybe you'll just reverse those views and go back to the old guy who said straight up, women do not belong in combat. Now, Mr. Hegstaff, you have written that after they retire, generals should be banned from working for the defense industry for 10 years. You and I agree on the corrosive effects of the revolving door between the Pentagon and defense contractors. It's something I would have liked to talk to you about if you'd come and been willing to visit with me. But the question I have for you on this is, will you put your money where your mouth is and agree that when you leave this job, you will not work for the defense industry for 10 years?
Senator, it's not even a question I've thought about because
You can
it's
think
not
about it
one
right
that,
now.
It's not one, my motivation for this job
I
has
understand
never
that. I
been
just
about
need
what
a
could
yes or no
conceivably
here.
come next.
Time is short. I just need a yes or no.
I would consult with the president about what the policy should be
In
at the Defense
other
Department.
words, you're quite sure that every general who serves should not go directly into the defense industry for 10 years. But you're not willing to make that same pledge?
I'm not a general, Senator.
You'll be the one, let us just be clear, in charge of the generals. So you're saying sauce for the goose, but certainly not sauce for the gander?
I would want to see what the policy of the
Oh,
president
I'll
is.
bet you would.
Thank you, Senator Warren. Senator Tuberville.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, Mr. Turner, I want to ask you about why housing costs are so high. You recently said there is, quote, an ever-growing need for high-quality, affordable housing in our nation. Experts have said, as the chairman said, we need about 7 million new housing units in America. Now, there are a lot of explanations for our housing shortage. Local zoning and land use restrictions can make it harder to build homes. The cost of capital, which has been made worse by the Fed's decision to keep interest rates high, makes it even more difficult both to build and to buy housing. And there are places where the federal government can help. Take the HOME program. HUD gives grants to states and localities to help build and preserve affordable housing, and it works. In its history, HOME has supported the development of more than 1 million affordable units nationwide, including more than 100,000 homes in your home state of Texas. Mr. Turner, in 2023, you said that, quote, it is more expensive than ever to build, and developers need access to more capital. Do you support additional federal investment in programs so that we can lower the cost of building affordable housing?
Thank you, Senator Warren. I appreciate our visit together, and thank you for your time in this. As you said, there are many factors to why housing is so expensive now. And I believe first we have to get our fiscal house in order in our country. Interest rates are at an all-time high. Inflation is at an all-time high.
Fair enough, Mr. Turner, but
Yes, ma'am.
I'd just like to focus, because it is a big problem, and I'm sorry to interrupt, but the chairman's going to be tough on time. And that is, I just want to make sure I understand. Do you support additional federal investment in programs so that we can lower the cost of building affordable housing?
Thank you, Senator Warren. What I do support is maximizing the budget that we do have and making sure that the money.
So is that a no to additional investments?
It's a yes to maximizing the investment that we have and making sure that the programs that we do have are meeting the intended need and serving those that are intended to serve.
Well, I have to say that gives me real pause. You know, we just established that we have a terrible gap of affordable housing, and we have a program here that has helped close that gap. State and local governments, I understand, bless them, they're doing what they can, but they don't have enough money to match the scale of the problem nationwide. And what I'm looking for is a commitment that we're at least going to try to get some more help to the state and local communities that are trying to build affordable housing.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. And I do look forward to looking at the home program and other programs. But my point, there's record funding from HUD. HUD's budget is nearly $70 billion at this point, and we're still not meeting the need that we're supposed to be meeting.
Which might mean that we need
we
more money
need to take
there.
inventory.
Let me, if I
maximize the
can,
budget.
turn to another
Yes,
to
ma'am.
another topic. You know, unfortunately, there are some people who are trying to take advantage of our housing shortage instead of trying to fix it. Private equity firms and corporate landlords have moved into local housing markets, and they have driven up costs even higher for families. In 2011, no single investor anywhere in America owned more than 1,000 single-family homes. By 2022, just 5 investors collectively owned nearly 300,000 homes. And in fact, in your home state of Texas in 2021, big investors moved in, and they bought a whopping 28% of all homes that went on the market. So Mr. Turner, the governor of Texas, Greg Abbott, recently said, quote, corporate large-scale buying of residential homes seems to be distorting the market and making it harder for the average Texan to purchase a home. Do you agree that it is a problem if big corporate investors are beating out families to try to buy homes?
Thank you, Senator. And I haven't seen that statement from Governor Abbott, but I do look forward to looking at this issue and even working with you and your staff on this issue. I believe that we do have a housing affordability crisis in our country. The more capital we get into the market, the better. And obviously, we want the right people, qualified people to invest. And the stats that I saw, Senator, said about 2% of institutional investors own these single-family homes. And so if I'm confirmed by this committee, I look forward to digging into this more with you so that we can look at this issue together.
Well, I appreciate that. You know, we've got to be laser focused on lowering the cost of housing for families.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Senator. Senator Rounds.
Your family. It's good to see everyone here today. So last month, President Trump said he supports repealing the debt limit. So do I. So there we are. Donald Trump and Elizabeth Warren are singing from the same hymnal. Mr. Bessent, let's make it a trio. Do you agree with President-elect Trump that the debt limit should be repealed?
Senator Warren, first of all, I enjoyed our visit in your office and appreciate the fact that when I walked in, you said, let's talk about what we have in common, our love of Cape Cod, the Red Sox, and that addressing the affordability crisis and the housing shortage. So the debt limit is a very nuanced convention. What I would like to do is get back to you and President Trump. I'd like to do a survey of market participants with this amount of debt. It's very fragile equilibrium that we sell bonds in.
Mr. Bessent, forgive me for just a minute here, because this is the question about I'm not asking you whether or not we ought to increase our debt. I'm asking a very different question, and that is whether or not we should have a statute in place that says there's a debt limit that, if we don't increase the debt limit, would cause us to default. And that's not an economic analysis. In fact, let me ask you, I understand earlier you were citing the Congressional Budget Office. Have you seen the Congressional Budget Office projections of what would happen if the United States government defaulted on its debt? That is, if we hit the debt limit and just kept on going without raising it or eliminating it?
Yeah, look, Senator Warren, the United States is not going to default on its debt if I'm confirmed. But I will tell you that for people who don't understand the debt limit, it might be like taking out your handbrake in your car, that you can still hit the brakes, but it's one less feature.
But I thought you just said you'd never use it. So you're talking about a handbrake that appears to be there, but in fact is not connected to a braking system. It is
Sorry?
literally never used, right?
Never been used. I've never pulled a handbrake going 60 miles an hour in my car.
And the reason
I
for
hope
that,
never
I
to.
assume, is the enormous cost of a debt default. In fact, the Congressional Budget Office that I was asking you about a minute ago said that, or Moody's estimated, that a debt limit breach would cost the U.S. economy $12 trillion and cost 6 million people their jobs. I think this is the reason that President-elect Trump said that eliminating the debt limit is, quote, the smartest thing Congress could do. And I'd like for Congress to do the smartest thing, and that is eliminate the debt limit so we don't have this problem.
Well, Senator Warren, I will tell you that once President Trump takes office, and if I'm confirmed, if he wants to eliminate the debt limit, I will work with him and you on that.
Great, great, because I agree with President-elect Trump that the debt limit should be repealed. I note, however, right now that's not what congressional Republicans plan to do. Last month, they committed to raising the debt limit by another $1.5 trillion. So why do Republicans want to raise the debt ceiling? Because their plan is to shovel new tax cuts to billionaires, and that would increase the debt by more than $1 trillion just in the next 4-year period. During his first term, President Trump's only major legislative achievement was his 2017 tax cuts that mostly got sucked up by millionaires, billionaires, and giant corporations. Now, most of these cuts were good for only 8 years so that Republicans who were designing them could claim that the cost was only $2 trillion, 8 years of cuts that added $2 trillion to the debt. Now we're talking about Republicans and President-elect Trump who want to give those same rich people and giant corporations more years of tax cuts. And I just want to be clear that we understand each other here, that I think it was Senator Warnock who asked you about, is there any billionaire rich enough who you wouldn't support a tax cut for going forward?
That I think it's unwise to single out any
Rich people?
any individual.
Okay, is there any group of billionaires? You can just pick a dollar figure and there can be more than one above that.
I could give you a glib answer, but I won't. But again, that's not where the money is. At one point when President Obama was debating Mitt Romney, the moderator said, "But sir, that would make collections go down." And he said, "Yeah, but it's about fairness." And I have to tell you, Senator Warren, I'm about collection.
I understand, but I like to think that fairness is about billionaires actually paying their fair share too. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Scott.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Scott, welcome, or Mr. Besson, welcome to our committee, and good to see you again, and thank you for your willingness to serve. It is certainly a sacrifice to you and your family, but I think it's actually an investment for the country. We need folks who are willing to sacrifice on behalf of a greater cause. The greater cause in this instance is generations of Americans you will likely never meet, but will be better off because we do the right thing.
Senator Warren.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, Mr. Kennedy, I want to start with something that I think you and I agree on, and that is that Big Pharma has too much power in Washington. You've said that President Trump asked you to, quote, clean up corruption and conflicts. Sounds great. You've said that you will, quote, slam shut the revolving door between government agencies and the companies they regulate. That also sounds great. So here's an easy question. Will you commit that when you leave this job, you will not accept compensation from a drug company, a medical device company, a hospital system, or a health insurer for at least 4 years, including as a lobbyist or a board member?
Can you just repeat the last part of the question? Can I commit
You're
to
not
what?
going to take money from drug companies in any way, shape, or form.
Who? Me?
Yes, you.
Oh. Yeah, I'm happy to commit to that.
Okay, good. That's what I figured. I said it's an easy question to start with. And I think you're right on this
I don't
question.
think any of them want to give me money, by the way.
Let's let's keep going. You're right, because to say yes, because every American has the right to know that every decision you make as our #1 health officer is to help them and not to make money for yourself in the future. So I want to talk more about money. I'm looking at your paperwork right now. In the past 2 years, you've raked in $2.5 million from a law firm called Wisner Baum. You go online, you do commercials to encourage people to sign up with Wisner Baum to join lawsuits against vaccine makers. And for everyone who signs up, you personally get paid. And if they win their case, you get 10% of what they win. So if you bring in somebody who gets $10 million, you walk away with $1 million. Now, you just said that you want the American people to know you can't be bought. Your decisions won't depend on how much money you could make in the future. You won't go to work for a drug company after you leave HHS. But you and I both know there's another way to make money. So, Mr. Kennedy, will you also agree that you won't take any compensation from any lawsuits against drug companies while you are secretary and for 4 years afterwards?
Well, I'll certainly commit to that while I'm secretary. But I do want to clarify something because you're making me sound like a shill. I put together that case. I did the Science Day presentation to the judge on that case to get it into court.
Mr. Kennedy, it's just a really simple question. Yeah, you've taken in $2.5 million. I want to know if you will commit right now that not only will you not go to work for drug companies, you won't go to work suing the drug companies and taking your rake out of that while you're secretary and for 4 years after. It's just...
I'll commit to not taking any fees from drug companies while I'm secretary. No,
I'm asking about fees from suing drug companies. Will you agree not to do that?
You're asking me to not sue drug companies,
no,
and I'm not going to agree to that,
drug companies as much as you want.
I'm not going to agree to not sue drug companies or anybody.
So let's do a quick count here of how, as secretary of HHS, if you get confirmed, you could influence every one of those lawsuits. Well, let me start the list. You could publish your anti-vaccine conspiracies, but this time on U.S. government letterhead, something a jury might be impressed by. You could appoint people to the CDC vaccine panel who share your anti-vax views and let them do your dirty work. You could tell the CDC vaccine panel to remove a particular vaccine from the vaccine schedule. You could remove vaccines from special compensation programs, which would open up manufacturers to mass torts. You could make more injuries eligible for compensation even if there is no causal evidence. You could change vaccine court processes to make it easier to bring junk lawsuits. You could turn over FDA data to your friends at the law firm, and they could use it however it benefited them. You could change vaccine labeling. You could change vaccine information rules. You could change which claims are compensated in the vaccine injury compensation program. There's a lot of ways that you can influence those future lawsuits and pending lawsuits while you are secretary of HHS, and I'm asking you to commit right now that you will not take a financial stake in every one of those lawsuits so that what you do as secretary will also benefit you financially down the line.
I'll comply with all the ethical guidelines.
That's not the question. You and I, you have said
you're asking me, Senator, you're asking me not to sue vaccine pharmaceutical companies. Yeah, you are. That's exactly what you're doing.
Look, no one should be fooled here. As secretary of HHS, Robert Kennedy will have the power to undercut vaccines and vaccine manufacturing across our country. And for all of his talk about follow the science and his promise that he won't interfere with those of us who want to vaccinate his kids, the bottom line is the same. Kennedy can kill off access to vaccines and make millions of dollars while he does it. Kids might die, but Robert Kennedy can keep cashing in.
Senator, I support vaccines. I support the childhood schedule. I will do that. The only thing I want is good science, and that's it.
How about then say you won't make money off what you do as Secretary of HHS?
Before we go to Senator Tillis, I think it would be important for me to make it very clear that Mr. Kennedy has gone through the same Office of Government Ethics process as every single other nominee in the Finance Committee this year and in previous administrations. In addition to listing his assets, including the items that you've identified, he has signed an ethics letter that has been reviewed by the Office of Government Ethics concerning any possible conflict in light of its functions and the nominee's proposed duties. And we have a letter from the Office of Government Ethics that he hasn't complied completely with all applicable laws and regulations governing conflicts of interest.
Mr. Chairman, point of information here. Have we had a single nominee come through who's made $2.5 million off suing one of the entities that it would be regulating and plans to keep getting a take of every lawsuit in the future? Have we had that before?
I haven't reviewed the past documentation of every other nominee's financial interests, and so no. But I know that every single time we get a nominee, their financial interests are attacked. That's why we have the Office of Government Ethics. That's why they've reviewed everything that's in his record, and that's why he has even, I think, and I don't know that I want to ask him to get into it, but he has listed his assets and has gone through a discussion of the responsibilities under our ethics laws and is complied with all of those requirements. Senator Tillis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Kennedy, how?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Since we had our hearing last week, Mr. Kennedy has amended his ethics agreement. Recall that his ethics agreement said that while he was Secretary of HHS, he intended to retain a financial interest in ongoing vaccine litigation that he was already collecting money from, and that he wanted to continue to collect that money even though he could affect the outcome of that litigation. Now, he has since changed his position on that. He, once this has been exposed and people have talked about it and have some pretty serious reservations about his doing that, he has said that he will instead give his financial interest to his son. That is a fig leaf that is so small, it would take a magnifying glass to see it. No one is fooled about what's happening here. Mr. Kennedy refuses to say that he will not participate in these lawsuits financially the day after he leaves office. And yet, Mr. Kennedy has acknowledged, first, that the American people have a right to know that the decisions you're making are decisions that are in their interest, not in your future financial interest. He has said he thinks that's the right standard, and yet he has figured out how to make money off his anti-vax positions. He's already raked in $2.5 million. He is in a position where he can affect the outcomes by things he does as Secretary of HHS, and yet he refuses to say that he will delay by even a day taking on anti-vax lawsuits the minute he leaves. That is an appalling conflict of interest, and it's one in which the American people can reasonably ask, is Mr. Kennedy's plan to help the American people, or is he planning to use this job to further enrich himself, and he's pointed out with his son, and enrich his family? The importance of this litigation cannot be overstated. This is not only about a private company that gets sued and has to pay out. Vaccine manufacturers often operate on very slim profit margins. If they get sued repeatedly and successfully, they simply move out of the vaccine space. We've already seen this happen with vaccines in the past. 20 years ago, we watched vaccines just move away if they did not have protection from these kinds of lawsuits. The consequence of Mr. Kennedy's ability to make those lawsuits easier is also the ability to shut down access and manufacturing for vaccines for every one of us. And I think that's a terrible mistake.
Thank you.
So, Mr. Feinberg, you've been nominated to be Secretary of Defense in charge of DOD's $850 billion budget. Your main qualification is that you have built one of the world's largest private equity companies. You've spent your entire career honing the private equity tools that used to hollow out our businesses, from department stores to veterinary practices. And presumably those are the skills that you would bring to the Department of Defense. So I just want to look at how that's worked. Let's start with how you treat people. In Massachusetts in 2010, your private equity firm bought 6 nonprofit hospitals, turned them into for-profit hospitals called Steward. 10 years later, you cashed out, having made a profit, a little shy of $1 billion, and leaving behind a hospital system that was staggered under a load of debt, and 4 years later, collapsed into bankruptcy. Now, Mr. Feinberg, when we met in my office, you told me that your private equity outfit made an average 23% annual return each year that you owned your hospitals. If Steward Nurses had gotten the same 23% salary increases that your investors effectively got every year, do you know how much they would be paid at the time you sold off your hospitals?
Well, I do know that in 2010, the hospitals were going under, and we were asked...
I'm sorry, Mr. Feinberg, we're going to have very limited time here, and I actually want to spend it on your qualifications to do this job, and it's about how you treat people. The average nurse in the Steward hospitals at the time you bought them made $85,120. At a 23% annual raise, how much money would they be making right now?
I'm not going to do the math. But
okay, I'll do the math for you.
Well, what I could tell you...
$829,828. Now, of course, the nurses didn't do that well. During that same period of time, Kearney Hospital, one of the hospitals you bought in Massachusetts, raised nurses' salaries about 1.5% a year, and that was the best increase across the Steward hospitals that you were running. In other words, you seem to think that when it is time to reorganize a business, that equity should get about 15 times as much return on their investment as the people who actually do the work. So let's take a look at the second issue, and that is maintaining critical functions.
Senator, would you like me to respond to Stewart?
Because a lot of
inaccurate
but
statements.
we also
Mr. Feinberg,
need to maintain
she's
our
entitled to
national
make
security.
a speech.
I apologize.
She's
So let
entitled to
us
go
go
on and
back
on.
to Steward hospitals. Yes. Did you cut fat or did you cut vital functions? Now, Mr. Feinberg, the town of Quincy used to have a full medical center with primary and specialty care, a surgery department, an urgent care department, and a VA clinic. That was its basic function. After your private equity company finished with it, what was left?
Well, when we exited the investment in 2020, the company was doing well.
I'm asking what was left of the Quincy Hospital.
Now,
when you took
Senator,
it over,
he's trying to answer a question. You finally stopped for a breath. Do you intend to let him at least have maybe 20, 30 seconds to answer a question?
Can I have my time back?
Yes, I said you're entitled to make a speech, but you stopped for, you stopped with a question mark, and he started to try to answer the question.
All right. What's the answer to the question? What was left of the Quincy Hospital? That was my question.
A lot's happened after we exited, and there has been mismanagement. We did
By
say...
clarifying question, what was left when you exited?
I'm not certain about that,
It was an emergency room and nothing more.
But we took those hospitals from collapse in 2010. We're going to shut it down as the 10th largest employer of Massachusetts, turned them around, fixed them, grew them, had a tremendous amount of success, worked closely with the governor, and the problems that Stewart happened after we exited the investment.
I am asking about questions as you exited and during the period of time you ran it. Now, of course, a hospital is supposed to provide good quality care, and that takes qualified nurses and other staffers. Mr. Feinberg, for the hospitals that didn't close down during the time you ran it, do you know how many unsafe staffing complaints were filed?
I do know the vast majority of problems happened after we left. And by the way, our nurses were among the highest paid in the country.
Is that a no, that you don't know how much?
I don't know.
How many unsafe staffing complaints were filed? Well, let me tell you, there were over 1,000 filed. That is 5 times the normal rate in Massachusetts.
What year was that?
Look, these are the years that you were in control. For the 2 hospitals.
Senator Warren, perhaps you would like to take another round. But,
No, I'd like to just finish.
No,
I
your
just have
time
a
has
quote.
expired, Senator. Your time has expired.
I spent a great deal of that time listening to the chairman tell me how I
Senator's
have to
time has
conduct my
expired.
questions.
Senator's time has
No,
expired.
could I just
Senator
close?
Sullivan.
Let's take it. Senator Warren is up next.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. So President Trump had exactly one big legislative accomplishment in his first term, a giant tax cut for millionaires, billionaires, and massive corporations. In fact, it was so giant that a big hunk of it lasted only 8 years and still cost $2 trillion. Now, the 8 years are up, so Republicans want to do another tax cut for the ultra-wealthy, which Congress's nonpartisan budget scorers say is going to cost $4.6 trillion this time. Now, congressional Republicans say they care about the deficit, so they have a plan to fix things up. Repeal math. Here's their story. Because they already had 8 years of tax cuts that ran up the debt, congressional Republicans claim that 10 more years of tax cuts will be free. They named this gimmick the current policy baseline. They should have named it magic math. It is so nuts that when we need to figure out the cost of tax cuts, the Senate has never switched to it over using real math. Now, Dr. Falkender, if confirmed, you will play a role in whatever tax deal the Republicans put together. So let's talk about math, magic math and real math. Dr. Falkender, does renaming tax cuts produce any additional revenue?
Does renaming them?
Yes. Calling them something different. Does that produce any additional revenue?
I don't think renaming something changes. If it changes behavior, it has the potential to change revenues.
Wait, so are you saying renaming tax cuts produces additional revenue? Just renaming it?
I can't imagine that it would unless it causes people to behave differently.
Okay, I'll take that as no. Fair enough. Claiming that somehow losing $4.6 trillion in tax revenues is free is just plain nuts. Congressional Republicans are hoping they can fool people long enough to deliver giveaways to their wealthy donors before anyone figures it out. But at the end of the day, Republicans cannot repeal math. A bunch of tax cuts for billionaires will cost $4.6 trillion. But congressional Republicans don't like that answer. So I'm wondering, if they love magic math so much, I want to ask the same question in reverse. If the Republicans' idea of magically not counting the cost of tax cuts for billionaires makes sense, what about not counting the cost of tax cuts for ordinary people? That is, for extending the child tax credit. Dr. Falkender, according to Republicans' magic math, if extending the tax cuts is free, shouldn't extending a temporary expansion of the child tax credit also be free?
Thank you, Senator. The Tax Cuts and Jobs Act increased the child tax credit from $1,000 to $2,000.
Yep.
And so if we allow the tax cut to expire, it would mean that the child tax credit would go back to the $1,000.
Right. So the question I'm asking, using Republican magic math, if it is free to extend tax cuts for billionaires, isn't it also free to extend tax cuts for poor kids?
Senator, I'm not familiar with magic math. What I do know is that the American people look at the current tax code, what they paid last year and what they paid this year, as the current environment.
Yeah,
and so the question is, when we talk about extending it, I would argue that extending the TCJA is making sure that the American people don't incur a $4.5 trillion tax increase.
So you do think that renaming the tax cuts will produce $4.5 trillion in revenue?
No, Senator, I didn't say that it had any impact on the bottom line deficit. I'm just saying when you ask me what a baseline is, to me the baseline is what I'm currently doing.
I'm not asking you that. I'm asking you what it costs to put in $4.5 trillion in tax cuts. Look, if Republican magic math works, then why not extend it to everything we spend money on? How about money we spent last year on roads and bridges, or child care subsidies and the workers who process Social Security checks? Of course not. No one is going to do that. Congressional Republicans want to use magic math to pass giant tax cuts and then try to tell the American people those tax cuts cost nothing. Hardworking Americans understand that $4.6 trillion for a billionaire tax cut is not free. Congressional Republicans are trying to sell magic math so they can help billionaires. And fortunately, the American people are just not buying that. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
All right, my colleague from New Mexico.
Senator Warren.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, Dr. Oz, if confirmed, you would oversee Medicare coverage for more than 66 million Americans. Now, nearly half have traditional Medicare, where the federal government provides health care coverage directly. The other half are on Medicare Advantage, where the federal government pays a private for-profit insurer to administer the health benefits instead. And surprise, surprise, the privatized Medicare costs a whole lot more. So let's talk about the top trick that Medicare Advantage insurers use to gouge taxpayers. Upcoding. I understand Senator Cassidy started on this morning, and I just want to dig a little deeper. In Medicare Advantage, taxpayers give insurers a set amount per patient. The more diagnoses or the more codes the patient has, the higher the payment. Now, in theory, this covers higher costs for sicker patients, but insurance companies get the money for the codes, not actually for the services they do or don't deliver. So Medicare Advantage insurers have figured out that if they can add a bunch of fake diagnoses that they don't actually have to spend money treating, they can really boost their profits. One example, last year, the Wall Street Journal identified 66,000 Medicare Advantage patients diagnosed with diabetic cataracts who had already gotten cataract surgery. Now, that is, as you know, anatomically impossible. So, Dr. Oz, insurers pocketed an extra $178 million in taxpayer money last year, thanks to just this one fake diagnosis. Does that sound like Medicare fraud to you?
Senator Warren, I appreciated you spending time with me in your office. The answer is yes. It's anatomically impossible. And I'll give you one more example.
Okay.
Which is sending someone to your home, which you brought up in the office. If you're going to say it, I won't say it, but you pointed out something that's very real, which is if you send someone if an insurance company sends someone to your home, there's probably a reason for it. And so if they're doing ultrasounds to look for minor atherosclerotic plaques, which is not really something that needs to be treated, and most Americans have, it's primarily done to upcode you, which has two problems. One, it's cheating because you're able to charge more for those patients, but then people who truly have limb-threatening peripheral vascular disease, who have that box checked in their care, those companies, insurance companies, don't get paid more. Those doctors don't get reimbursed more for doing what is ethically correct. So it doesn't just help the scoundrels who are stealing from the vulnerable, it's actually hurting the people trying to take care of those vulnerable populations.
In fact, let's talk about how bad that upcoding is that comes from the home visits. HHS Inspector General found that in 2022 alone, United Health used these home visits to add about $2.3 billion worth of diagnoses. diagnoses that led to absolutely no treatment. And I take it you think that sounds like fraud as well.
We are, I think, as an agency, aware of this. I haven't been in there yet, but if confirmed, this will be one of the topics that is relatively enjoyable to go after, because I think we have bipartisan support.
I love hearing this. So upcoding is a scandal. And overall, we know that Medicare Advantage overpayments cost at least $83 billion in a single year. So $83 billion, remember that number. Last month, Republicans in the House passed a budget framework that sets up $88 billion in annual cuts to health care, Medicaid funding for seniors in nursing homes, and for people with disabilities who have a home health aide, and more. So, Dr. Oz, I have a simple question. If you had the choice, would you rather cut waste, fraud, and abuse by a Fortune 50 health insurance company in Medicare Advantage, or cut funding for Medicaid, which covers half of all seniors in nursing homes and 1 in 3 of America's children?
My goal is to improve the health care of the American people. And as you create the argument, the former sounds like a more rational way to do that.
I appreciate that. You know, I am happy to work with Republicans to go after waste, fraud, and abuse. But let's cut out waste, fraud, and abuse where it actually occurs, like upcoding in Medicare Advantage. Republicans cutting health care for seniors and for babies and for people with disabilities, while the waste and the fraud just roll right along for a multi-billion-dollar insurance company, is sickening, and I will fight that every step of the way. Thank you, Dr. Oz.
Thank you.
Thank you. Senator Warren.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So 90 years ago, Congress passed the Social Security Act, and the deal was simple. You work hard, you pay into Social Security across all your earnings years, and then when you retire, you can count on having those Social Security benefits that you paid for. And now, co-presidents Trump and Musk want to renege on that deal. So DOGE has taken a sledgehammer to the Social Security Administration, firing staff, closing field offices, and pulling the plug on phone services. Last week, the acting commissioner of Social Security, who is openly working with Elon Musk, actually threatened to shut down the entire agency. Now, this isn't about efficiency. Elon said the quiet part about his plans right out loud. Musk said we should, quote, eliminate Social Security. The richest man in the world said that Social Security for 73 million Americans should be destroyed. Mr. Bisignano, you have been nominated to be in charge of Social Security, and seniors need to have a right to know if you're going to protect their benefits. So let's start simple. Say a 66-year-old man qualifies for Social Security. Mr. Bisignano, could the Social Security Administration or Elon Musk or Donald Trump decide to cut her benefits by $5,000 for no reason without a new law passed by Congress?
Is that a question, ma'am?
Yeah, that's a question.
I don't see that happening.
I didn't ask if you see it happening. Could they, by law, cut those benefits without coming to Congress?
No.
No. All right, so let's dig deeper. Suppose this same 65-year-old calls the helpline to apply for Social Security, but he's told about the new DOGE rule, so he has to go online or in person. He can't drive, he has trouble with the website, so he waits until his niece can get a day off to take him to the local Social Security office. But DOGE closed that office, so they have to drive 2 hours to get to the next closest office. When they get there, there are only 2 people who are staffing a 50-person line, so he doesn't even make it to the front of the line before the office closes, and he has to come back. Now, let's assume it takes our fellow 3 months to straighten this out, and he misses a total of $5,000 in benefits checks, which, by law, he will never get back. So, Mr. Bisignano, is that a benefit cut?
Well, first of all, Senator,
Is that a benefit cut? I'm sorry, my time is limited here. That's an easy question, yes or no? Is it a benefit cut?
I have no intent to have anything like that happen on my watch,
I
ma'am.
understand that. Is it a benefit cut?
I'm not sure what to call it. It sounds like a horrible
Is the
situation.
person getting the $5,000 they were legally entitled to?
That was your scenario, and
So are they getting $5,000 they were legally entitled to?
I don't know. I
You
mean,
don't
you just told
know?
me. Yeah,
Look,
I mean,
let's be clear. That you keep $5,000 from them by announcing a policy, it's illegal. But there are backdoor ways to accomplish the same thing. DOGE is considering slashing up to 50% of the Social Security Administration's workforce. That means longer lines, more errors. And for everyone who gives up or who dies before they get their benefits sorted out, those delays and errors also turn into benefit cuts. Elon Musk is the richest man in the world, so he doesn't need Social Security. He'd be glad to get rid of it, but only Congress can cut Social Security benefits, and Elon is trying a backdoor way. So, Mr. Bisignano, if you are confirmed in this job, will you commit to reversing these cuts so that seniors get the money that the law says they are entitled to?
what I will commit to is that I will run the agency and I will be in charge of the agency and I will look at every item you want me to look at.
That's not what I'm asking you. I'm asking, you just answered the previous questions by saying you would follow the law.
Yes.
The law is to deliver the benefits that people are legally entitled to. If you don't have the staff, if you don't answer the phones, if you don't fix the mistakes, people don't get what they're legally entitled to. So I want to know, are you willing to commit right now that you will put enough people back to work so they can do the job of delivering the benefits that Americans earned?
I will commit,
yes or no?
I will commit to have the right staffing to get the job done.
To get the job done, meaning delivering the benefits people are entitled to?
Yes.
I'm going to hold you to that.
I appreciate that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Donald Trump is single-handedly driving this economy off a cliff. With no evidence to back him up, he's claimed emergency authorities to slap new tariffs on nearly every product we import from nearly every country. But Congress has the power to reverse these tariffs, and we should do so immediately. Tariffs can be a tool to help build things in America, but Trump has slapped tariffs on, then off again with no rhyme or reason. And the uncertainty about the long-term rules makes companies far less likely to invest in manufacturing or jobs here in the United States. If Congress doesn't stand up to Trump, economists predict a recession before the end of the year. And Fed Chair Jerome Powell says we're in a real danger of, quote, both higher unemployment and higher inflation. Translation, Trump's tariffs will push millions of workers out of jobs and push prices up at the same time. So, Ambassador Greer, we've heard a lot of conflicting statements about whether these tariffs are here to stay, how many more rounds of on-off we're going to do. So let me ask the question from a different perspective. Ambassador Greer, we lost 700,000 jobs each month in the last recession. If 700,000 Americans lose their jobs, will the Trump administration suspend these tariffs?
Senator, I think the economists who are making these projections, who often are in favor of fully unfettered free trade, are the same ones who said in the first Trump term that putting tariffs
Greer,
I something that's going to happen,
let me just
Senator.
stop you there. I'm not asking about projections. I'm asking if the numbers show that 700,000 people have lost their jobs because of these new tariffs that Trump has slapped on, will the administration reverse course and lift those tariffs?
Senator, that's not going to happen. We've lost 5 million manufacturing jobs over the years, which is the number I'm most worried about, and we have to get those jobs
back. So I take that as a no. Let me try another one. Moody's says that if the Trump tariffs remain in place, we will definitely plunge into a recession, which will ultimately cost 3.5 million Americans their jobs. So, Ambassador Greer, if Trump's tariffs push 3.5 million people out of work, will the Trump administration reverse course and lift those tariffs?
Senator, the Wall Street analysts are wrong. They never want to have any kind of change to the status quo.
Right or
but that's who you're quoting to me,
Senator.
Senator.
I'm giving you a number. If the number is 3.5 million, if it never comes to pass, you don't have to worry about your answer. But if 3.5 million people lose their jobs because of these tariffs, is the Trump administration prepared to lift them?
Right now, this minute, we're working on negotiations with countries who believe they can achieve reciprocity with us and get their trade deficit down. And that's the emergency we're focused on. There's not going to be a situation where years from now we've lost millions of jobs.
Let me try one more time. If Trump tariffs push workers out of their jobs and raise prices, as Fed Chair Powell has predicted, will you reverse course then?
I think also with respect to Chairman Powell, who I don't know personally, but I know the president makes decisions on trade, and he rarely takes advice from Chairman Powell on this. We found in Trump 1 that you could put tariffs on China and you could make it work and have lower income, lower unemployment, lower inflation, and increase real median household income over time as we reshore. And that's what we have to do, Senator.
What I'm hearing you say is that no one can hear a rhyme or reason to why the tariffs are off again, on again, off again, on again. But what you're telling us is the fact that hundreds of thousands, even millions of people could lose their jobs and that prices could go up will not be a factor for you or for Donald Trump for rolling those tariffs back. Look, if Republicans are serious about protecting American jobs and fighting inflation, then they can join Democrats right now to pass a resolution to fix Trump's reckless tariffs. This economy is teetering on the edge of collapse. We have the power right here in the Senate and over in the House of Representatives to take this authority away from Donald Trump. We can get this voted on. Senator Wyden and I have already are about to introduce the bill to do that. And if Republicans are serious about not playing the red light, green light with tariffs, but instead about protecting our economy, our families, our jobs, and keeping prices low, then Republicans should join us on that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Welch.
Thank you. You know, there's a place for tariffs on China. Targeted tariffs make some sense. What is being rolled out and the way this is being done is so destructive and so reckless and so irresponsible that it's creating nothing but economic chaos.
It's got something indicating that the White House has raised the China tariff to 145%. Senator Warren.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In 2017, Donald Trump gave $2 trillion in tax cuts, mostly to billionaires and billionaire corporations. And now he's back for round two, this time a whopping $7 trillion in tax breaks for his rich donors. Now, Mr. Keyes, you've been a corporate lobbyist for nearly 30 years, successfully arranging tax breaks for Wall Street, for big tech, for big oil, and for big pharma. You've helped them all. And if confirmed as the top tax official at the Treasury Department, you will play a big role in handing out more tax cuts, including tax cuts to your former clients. So I just want to run through how this would work. Mr. Keyes, you've lobbied for Microsoft for years. Microsoft and other big tech companies are now demanding tax breaks to incentivize research that they would do anyway. But the real kicker is they want those tax breaks, called R&D expensing, to be retroactive, incentivizing them to make research decisions they made years ago. And Republicans have said, sure, why not? Mr. Keyes, do you know how much your client, Microsoft, stands to gain from just this one tax break?
No, Senator Warren.
Well, if the Trump administration delivers what tech lobbyists are clamoring for, Microsoft would get $11 billion to incentivize investments it made years ago. That's from Microsoft's own annual reports, by the way. That is nearly as much as the federal government spends in an entire year on childcare for all of our babies. One company, your client, $11 billion. So let's try another one, Mr. Keyes. You've also lobbied on behalf of Pfizer, one of the biggest drug companies out there. President Trump has proposed slashing the tax rate for corporations even further from 21% to 15%. Mr. Keyes, do you know how much your client Pfizer stands to gain from cutting the corporate tax rate to 15%?
Okay, Senator Warren, Pfizer is not my client. I closed my business on March 14th. None of those companies are my client. My client.
I'm sorry, your former client.
Okay, former
Pfizer,
client.
the one you lobbied for.
And Pfizer was a client over 10 years ago.
Do you know how much they stand to make?
No.
$4 billion from the Trump corporate tax cut. But there is more. The Republicans in Congress will set out the general rules for this tax giveaway, but your office at the Treasury Department will write the rules to implement those laws. When that happens, lobbyists will line up around the block to ask you for even more tax loopholes, which you know about firsthand because you did exactly that after the first Trump tax giveaway. Now, you've committed not to work on matters involving your clients or your former clients for only 1 year. That means on day 366, while you are still in your job, you can go right back to handing out loopholes that could boost the bottom lines of Microsoft or Pfizer or any other of your former and future clients. Mr. Keyes, the American people would like to know that when you draw a government paycheck, you'll be working just for them, not for your past and future clients. So will you commit to recusing yourself from matters that would affect the financial interests of your former clients for the entire time that you are in office?
So, Senator Warren, you and I had a very polite discussion about this when we met, and I advised you at that time, which is what I will tell you in public. I will comply with the terms of the ethics letter, which was written by career experts on ethics. And I would also reference you to the Bloomberg article today in which Scott Amy, the general counsel of the Project on Government Oversight, said the following: this is someone, me, who is taking government ethics very seriously.
Very seriously.
And was
I
making
appreciate that, but I'm
attempts.
running out of time here.
Well, I would encourage you to read the article.
I will take this as a no. And the fact that you say it's okay with the Trump administration that on day 366, you will be handing out tax loopholes to clients that you took in millions of dollars from and that you've made no pledge not to go back and make them your clients again in the future. That may be okay with the Trump administration. I don't think it's okay with the American people. Donald Trump cares about one group of people and one group of people only, himself and his billionaire friends. So it's no surprise that he has nominated a highly paid corporate tax lobbyist to run tax policy for the American people. We need a government that works for working people, not just massive corporations, their CEOs and their lobbyists. And that's what's going to happen under Mr. Keyes' watch. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Barrasso.
Thanks very much, Mr. Chairman. It was good to visit with both of you earlier. Congratulations on the nominations. I was just on the floor.
Thank you, Senator.
Ranking Member Warren.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So anyone who's been awake for the last week has seen the self-inflicted economic maelstrom that both the United States and the world have lived through. The Trump administration is living in a fantasy land and evidently not living there alone. According to Team Trump, the economy is booming, tariff money is rolling in, massive tax cuts for billionaires will be free, and the research scientists DOGE has fired from the National Institute of Health and the customer service specialists that they fired from the Social Security Administration are happily screwing in tiny little iPhone screws as they work in iPhone factories that have magically sprung up across the country. Look, the Trump administration is in desperate need of financial regulators who live in the real world. Governor Bowman, if confirmed, you would be the #1 financial cop on the beat during an incredibly dangerous time. As we've learned from previous crises, the tremors in the financial system can lead to avalanches in the rest of the economy and vice versa. You would be the person on the front line of defense to prevent that from happening. So Chair Powell said that President Trump's tariffs will lead to, and I quote, both higher unemployment and higher inflation. We've seen wild swings in the financial markets over the past week, at least some of us have seen them. Governor Bowman, I want to understand how you see the risks of the current moment. In what ways could President Trump's tariffs and their economic effects threaten the stability of our financial system?
Well, Senator, that's a great question, and I'd like to start by stating that the economy is strong.
Okay, fine, but answer my question if you would, please. Well, we're going to be limited on time. We've got a tough chairman here.
Economic growth has been solid, and though it may be slowing, and the unemployment rate is still historically low. Inflation came down today, as we saw with the recent CPI report.
Okay,
and I think that
Governor Bowman,
the stability
could you answer my question, please? I asked in what ways President Trump's tariffs and their economic effects threaten the stability of our financial system. Chair Powell has already identified it: higher inflation and higher unemployment. I'd like to hear from you what ways you think Trump's tariffs potentially threaten our financial system.
Senator, as you know, the mandated goals, or the goals that have been mandated by Congress for the Federal Reserve, are maximum employment and price stability. And as the path for these policies continues to
Could you use the word tariff? My question, I've asked it now twice, is in what ways do President Trump's tariffs threaten the financial system? Jay Powell has already answered this question. You're over at the Fed. Could you just give me a straight answer on that?
I think as we were watching and waiting to see how the path for these policies continues to evolve, we'll understand what the economic effects of
So are
those
you saying
policies
you
will
don't
be.
know if the tariffs could have any effect on the financial system?
Well, I think it's unclear at this point, since we don't know how the economic policies will be.
So let me get this straight.
And what their effects on the industries will be.
President Trump's tariffs threaten to strangle the economy. This is according to the Fed chair. The stock market is experiencing the kinds of swings we don't see outside financial crises. Even Treasury securities, they're supposed to be resilient when people fly to safety, have started to experience volatility. And you don't see any risks to the financial system? Nothing? You got nothing for me here?
Senator, what I would tell you is that we're starting on a strong economic foundation.
Okay, what I'm hearing is nothing.
As we see
So
that
look,
there has been
the
volatility
worst
in the stock
scenario
market that's
we
existed
have
for
here
a
is that
number of
this
years.
Trump-inflicted economic crisis undermines confidence in our financial system. Banks and other lenders may face huge losses as households and businesses struggle to meet their debt payments if we plunge into a recession. Hedge funds and other leveraged financial firms are already facing margin calls and may be forced to dump assets, including treasuries, at fire sale prices. Financial instability would amplify the harms of these irrational tariffs. And you want to just sit here and say, oh, it's all good. So let me ask you, Governor Bowman, will you immediately conduct a stress test of the big banks to probe whether they can endure a deep and prolonged recession triggered by a massive trade shock? Just run the tests. Are you willing to do that?
We have a process for stress testing that has already been underway this year, and it will continue to move forward as we planned.
So are you saying you will not run a stress test immediately? Is that exactly right? You're just, all of the things that have happened in the last week and in the last 2 months, you're just going to cover your eyes and cover your ears and say, I'm sure the banks will be fine. We'll check them out in several months.
Senator Warren, we are always watching the
always watching, but not running a stress test. I apologize for going over, Mr. Chairman. Lord.
Chairman, Senator Warren.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate your giving me this extra time so I can have a second round of questions. It's very generous. I want to respond first to a comment made by my colleague from North Carolina. Governor Bowman, this is just a yes or no question. At the onset of COVID, when markets were volatile, like we saw them last week, did Vice Chair Quarles initiate an emergency stress test or a so-called scenario analysis to understand whether or not the banks would be resilient to that shock?
Senator Warren, that
It's
was
just yes or no.
That was a very unique time in our.
It's
in
a
our
yes
economy.
or no. Did he?
Yes, he did.
Thank you. You know, I don't want to get in this tangle again, but people reasonably can ask why you are not willing to do this now and whether you're just worried about embarrassing President Trump, because this shock is one, unlike a virus, that is self-inflicted by the President of the United States. So I have a question for Mr. Fogel. Who would be responsible? He would be responsible for opening markets abroad for U.S. businesses. The president has made that job harder with the chaos of his on-again, off-again, on-again, off-again tariffs. The chairman of the Federal Reserve has said that costs are likely to rise, that unemployment is likely to go up. Some businesses are already handing out pink slips. Retirement accounts have taken a hit. Economists say if we continue down this road, a recession is inevitable. Mr. Fogel, do you agree that each of those outcomes is bad for American businesses?
Senator, first of all, I'm not an economist, and it's hard for me to.
Does that make it
address
hard to know whether or not
Well-
costs going up for families is a problem?
Well, but respectfully, I think he has been clear about his policies, and I think they're.
So the costs that have been identified by the chairman of the Federal Reserve, by economists, by things we can see with our own eyes, do you think those things are good things or bad things?
Again, Senator, I'm optimistic about the results.
Yeah,
of the
I know.
president's policies.
In the world you all live in, optimism seems to be the whole reality here. Let me just ask one other question, and that is a question about housing. This is one specific area where President Trump's red light, green light tariff chaos is really going to hit families. We currently have a housing shortage of about 5 million homes. This has raised housing costs and pushed homeownership out of reach for way too many families. President Trump's tariff war is making the problem even worse. For example, about 7% of goods that go into building a new home in the United States are imported, with China being the largest supplier of building materials by far. Things like appliances, lighting fixtures, power tools that construction workers use. Mr. Hughes, as you may know, President Trump just raised the tariffs on the goods we import from China to 145%. Do you think this is going to make it more expensive for home builders to build new homes?
Thank you for the question, Senator, and thank you for having me to your office yesterday. I really enjoyed our time. To answer your question, I'm not an economist, but I do believe in the president's vision and strategy for our country, and I think over time it's gonna be great.
Okay, that's not my question. If those costs go up, will it raise the price of housing for new home construction?
I think, Senator, to look at the whole issue, we've had millions of people come into this country over the last 4 years, about 10 million. We've had
Okay, I take it
increase
you're
in
not going to answer
regulations.
this question. This is a whole panel of
we've had-
people who want to do the dodge and weave. Well, let me give you an answer to this one. Last night, the CEO of the National Association of Home Builders said, quote, "We're anticipating higher material prices, which are either going to be absorbed by the builder or more likely they're going to be passed along to the consumer in the form of higher prices in the cost of that home. How much more will families have to pay for a new mid-sized home thanks to President Trump's tariffs? According to the National Association of Home Builders last night, between $7,500 and $10,000. Let me just say that again. President Trump's tariffs are raising the cost of a new home by $7,500 to $10,000, and that may just be the lower bound because President Trump's tariffs are also putting pressure on interest rate, which will make it more expensive to build and more expensive to get a mortgage. President Trump is making it personally impossible for more Americans to own a home. We're not going to have a chance to lower costs if Trump keeps up this tariff chaos. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate the extra time.
Thank you. Senator Warren.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Our military is strong because each member pledges loyalty to the Constitution, not to a specific president or a political party. And in return, military service and promotion are not tied to a political party or personal loyalty. President Trump threatens that political neutrality with no explanation. He has fired the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff and the chief of naval operations. Secretary Hegseth has purged top military lawyers and called for removing, quote, woke generals. Former defense secretaries have called this a, quote, new political standard for military service. So, Mr. Tata, if confirmed, you would be the defense secretary's principal advisor on personnel matters. You've already made your views clear. On November 2024, you posted on X that a, quote, must do, close quote, for the Trump administration will be to, quote, review every four-star appointed by Biden and thank many for their service before firing them. Mr. Tata, what evaluations did you do for each of the dozens of four-star generals and admirals to convince you that each of them needed to be fired?
Senator, that comment was in response to a CNN article that had credible sources that several admirals and generals were having discussions on how to resist lawful orders from the president usurping his Article II constitutional authority as commander-in-chief, which I find unacceptable. I think we can all agree that the Constitution of the United States that we swear an oath of office to, that I have done for many times in my career, is the ultimate, penultimate document that we support and that we swear an allegiance to. And so if there were people that were having those conversations, if there were admirals and generals that were having those conversations.
Mr. Tata, I have your tweet here, and your tweet doesn't say, I want to investigate person by person and see what they've done. I also want to make clear that when generals are having conversations about what to do if they receive illegal orders so that they can still follow their obligations under the Constitution of the United States, then they are following the law. They are not breaking the law. But let's go on to what else you have
Senator,
said.
if I might, the article said controversial, did not say illegal. And so controversial is very subject to interpretation.
I just want to clarify here. You want to say, you want to fire everybody. I've got your tweet here.
I don't want to fire anybody,
you think
Senator.
they gave controversial statements? I'm sorry, it says before firing them. Mr. Chairman, could I enter this into the record, please? Mr. Tata's tweet.
Is there objection? There being no objection, it is
All right,
so admitted.
Let me try another one. On November 2024, you posted on X that the Trump administration should choose only leaders who are, quote, all oars in the water to achieve Trump Agenda 47. That suggests that you believe that generals should be picked for loyalty to Donald Trump. Is that right? Is that what you believe?
That is not what I believe, Senator.
Then why did you post this?
Well, I was a private citizen when I posted that, and
So when you were a private citizen, you said things you didn't believe?
As
Still are a private
Agenda
citizen
47.
right now, Mr. Tata.
Senator, let him answer the question.
Senator, I'm respectfully trying to answer your question. Agenda 47 talks about shipbuilding. It talks about reducing the wars that we engage in. And so as a leader, I support the idea, I support the president's vision that he had in Agenda 47, though, from a foreign policy perspective, and that's what I was referring to.
That is not what this tweet says. Mr. Chairman, may I enter this tweet into the record?
Without objection.
In January 2025, just 4 months ago, Mr. Tata, you posted on X that planning for President Trump's inauguration should, your word, assume that the National Guard and DOD are, quote, compromised at a minimum by hatred of the incoming administration. What information did you have about each member of the Guard and DOD that caused you not only to draw this conclusion, but to put it out there in public?
Senator, I had no information that
So
informed.
you just said it about our Guard. You know, competence is based on the experience and performance of a military leader. Evidently, you have no information individually about the generals, the admirals, and the members of our National Guard and DOD who serve this country, and yet you're willing to say that they all need to be fired or treated as traitors. You seem to think that if a general or admiral was promoted during a Democratic administration, that person should be automatically fired. That's just a political purge and a pretty standard move for a dictatorship. I think it disqualifies you for this office.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So the IRS collects nearly all federal revenue, and that means that behind every road we build, every Social Security check that we pay is the IRS, making sure that everyone pays what the law says they owe. No politics. But Donald Trump has a different idea. He wants to use the IRS to punish his enemies. On May 2nd, Trump said, quote, "We are going to be taking away Harvard's tax-exempt status." Harvard wouldn't cave in to other demands Trump made, so Trump said he would hurt them using the IRS. Now, this is about more than Harvard. It is a threat to anyone who might displease the president, including the people or organizations that can't afford to have expensive legal battle if Trump sets the IRS on them. So, Mr. Long, when you and I met, I asked you whether it was illegal for the president to tell the IRS to revoke a taxpayer's nonprofit status. And you said in our meeting that you weren't sure, but you would take a look and consult with lawyers. I sent you the statute. You've had 3 weeks to talk to the lawyers about it. So let's jump in. Mr. Long, is it illegal for the president to direct the IRS to revoke a taxpayer's nonprofit status?
In the first place, he wouldn't do that. He's not going to come to me and say that.
That's not my question, Mr. Long. Please don't start down this.
Are we on section 7212 or 7217?
I'm at 26 U.S.C. 7217. Do I need to read it to you?
Prohibits any member of the executive branch to request the IRS to conduct or terminate an audit on a taxpayer.
All righty. So is it illegal?
I'm going to follow the law, and if that's the law, yes.
Okay, but I want you, that is the law.
Yeah.
So I just want to be clear. Is it illegal for the President of the United States to instruct the IRS to remove a taxpayer's nonprofit status?
Prohibits any member of the executive branch to request the IRS to conduct or terminate an audit of the taxpayer.
Is that a yes?
I'd have to go to the lawyers at the IRS to tell me.
No, come on. You just read it.
I know, but I don't see the instance that you're speaking about in there. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't see.
Look, it says it shall be unlawful for any applicable person, which in this case includes the president, to request directly or indirectly any officer or employee of the Internal Revenue Service to conduct or terminate an audit or other investigation of any particular taxpayer. Is it illegal for the president to instruct the IRS to remove nonprofit status from a taxpayer?
I'm not going to have the answer that you need, and I apologize, but like I said,
why are you not having the answer? You've had 3 weeks to consult with lawyers. The statute is about as clear as plain English.
Well, if I say I'm going to follow the law, why would you need to ask me the question?
Well, because I want to make sure that you understand what the law says. If you think follow the law means you just get to make it up on the spot, then, Bud, you don't get to be the IRS commissioner.
I said I would.
The point here is to follow the law as it is written, and I'm asking what I think is a pretty simple question. Can the President of the United States legally tell the IRS to change someone's nonprofit status?
I'm not able to answer.
You can't read these words and tell what those words say?
I can read the statute, and I did.
All right, then tell me what they mean. What does it mean to say that a person, an applicable person here, that's the president, right?
Yes.
All right.
All right.
Cannot directly or indirectly, right, tell any officer or employee, that would be you, of the Internal Revenue Service to conduct or terminate an audit or other investigation of any particular taxpayer. What part do you not understand here?
It seems to be a nonprofit. I don't see exactly what it refers to.
Any taxpayer to start an investigation of any taxpayer.
If it's illegal, I'm not going to allow it to happen in my IRS.
Is it illegal? That's the question.
Me and you will be friends
sure
then. I want to be your friend anyway, but we will be on the same page. I'm going to follow the law, and if that's point blank the law.
What do you understand the law to be saying about the president telling the IRS in his dealings with any particular taxpayer? What do you understand this law to be saying?
I think it sounds like it's saying what you're saying, but I've got a little bit of the section here, and I talked to an attorney that used to be at the IRS and now going to maybe be back at the IRS, and I'm sorry if I don't have the answer.
What, you mean the lawyers told you they couldn't understand this?
The what?
The lawyers told you they couldn't understand this?
I didn't say that.
Well, then tell me, what part do you not understand? It says no person, and you've said that's the president, that includes the president, cannot instruct any officer, that would be you, of the IRS to conduct or to terminate an audit or other investigation for any particular taxpayer.
I don't intend to let anybody direct me to start audit for political reasons or any other type of reason.
Does that include the President of the United States?
That's anyone.
Can you say yes, that the President of the United States cannot tell the IRS what to do?
I can tell them they're not going to tell me what to do. I can't speak for if there's other agents at the IRS that you're talking about, but I'm telling you what I don't want to have happen in my IRS.
You know, Mr. Long, you'd have a lot more credibility if you just say yes. It's clear that the statute makes it illegal for the president to direct the IRS vis-a-vis any particular taxpayer. And the fact that you want to sit there and dance around about this tells me that you shouldn't be within 1,000 miles of the directorship of the IRS.
And being proud that the United States has these economic rules. I think that's a better way to go. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Warren.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So Donald Trump ran for president on the promise to lower costs, a promise that he abandoned almost as soon as he got elected. He also promised his, quote, rich as hell donors that he would deliver big tax breaks. So right now, Senate Republicans are working overtime to pass billionaire tax giveaways, partly paid for by kicking 14 million people off their health care, and partly paid for by using magic math to pretend that those tax giveaways don't cost as much as they actually cost. Now, we've seen this play before. In 2017, Trump's first tax giveaway to the wealthy was supposed to cost just $1.5 trillion. And that was after there were a bunch of budget gimmicks to keep the total down. But even that wasn't a big enough giveaway. After the bill passed, the Trump Treasury Department drafted regulations to implement the new law, and corporations sent armies of lobbyists in to write even more loopholes into the tax laws. Now, Mr. Morrissey, you were Deputy General Counsel at Treasury at this time, so you may remember lobbyists from foreign banks like Credit Suisse and Barclays one big new international tax loophole for loans that they make to U.S. subsidiaries. Do you know how much those big banks pocketed from that extra giveaway engineered in the Treasury Department?
Senator, I'm familiar with many of the regulations under TCJA, but not the answer
not
to
that
your specific,
one?
not the answer to your
then
specific
I will
question.
tell you, it was $50 billion, according to the Joint Committee on Taxation. Now, today, President Trump and congressional Republicans are working to pass a new set of tax cuts for billionaires, millionaires, and giant corporations. This one, the price tag is around $4 trillion. And this time, they are planning to pay for it in part by slashing Medicaid and the Affordable Care Act by nearly $1 trillion and kicking 14 million Americans off their health care. It is handout time for billionaires and austerity for everyone else. Mr. Morrissey, you're nominated to be general counsel at Treasury, meaning you would help in the drafting and the implementation of this bill if it passed, maybe adding another $50 billion tax loophole here and another $50 billion tax loophole there. So, Mr. Morrissey, I just make sure you think through what this means. Do you know how many people will have to lose their Medicaid coverage just to pay for one of those $50 billion tax loopholes out of a $4 trillion Trump tax giveaway?
Senator, if I were to be confirmed, I would be committed to making sure that folks working at Treasury on tax issues are clear that the policy judgments in these space belong to the Congress.
That's not the question I'm asking here, Mr. Morrissey. I know you'd like to duck this one. My question is, when you create a $50 billion tax giveaway, do you know how many Americans lose Medicaid coverage to make up $50 billion? Do you know what those numbers is? These are just numbers.
Senator, again, the policy judgment is with the Congress, and
no,
Treasury
it's not a policy question I'm asking you. If you're going to be over at the Treasury Department and you're talking about being in a position where you can actually create a $50 billion loophole, and I know you can do that because you've done it in the past, I just want to make sure when you're doing the pluses and minuses of doing this, you have some idea how many Americans will lose their Medicaid coverage in order to make up for a $50 billion loophole. Do you have any idea how many people have to lose Medicaid coverage to create $50 billion?
Senator, whatever judgments this Congress
10,
makes in the statute
1,000,
to do
a million?
that,
Do you have any idea what that number is?
Senator, if I'm confirmed, I'm committed to making sure we are implementing.
Do you not have any idea about what that number is, or do you just not want to say it?
Senator, my role would be on the legal side, the policy judgments, the weighing of these important issues.
I will take that as you just don't want to have to admit it. It's 700,000 people to make up for a $50 billion loophole. It's like cutting off every single Medicaid recipient in the state of Nevada just to fund another $50 billion loophole like the ones you all managed to do last time around when you gave foreign banks this special loophole. And that's what this bill is all about, taking from struggling families to give handouts to billionaires and big corporations. In fact, according to independent experts, Trump's big, beautiful bill will take money away from the bottom 40% of families and turn around and shovel nearly $400,000 to everyone who's in the top 0.1%. So let me just ask you one last question. We'll finish this up. At a time when families are struggling with higher costs under President Trump, do you really think that Trump's big, beautiful bill should take away money from working class Americans, Mr. Morrissey?
Senator, I think the tax legislation that this Congress passed in 2017 raised living standards and helps Americans across the spectrum. And if Congress decides to take new action, I'm committed to working at Treasury to make sure we implement that.
You know, I just got to say, tax cuts for the wealthiest, a $50 billion loophole here, another one there, and so what? If hundreds of thousands of people lose their Medicaid and access to health care, that's what this bill is all about, and I think it's obscene. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I want to ask about the Republican big, beautiful bill, which will knock about 16 million people off their health care coverage and cut programs that keep groceries cheaper for millions of families in order to try to pay for about $4 trillion in tax giveaways that are mostly going to be sucked up by millionaires, billionaires, and wealthy corporations. So, Mr. Besson, Secretary Besson, I'd like to start with a very simple question. Will this bill increase or decrease the deficit?
They're varying scoring on that, Senator
You're the
Warren.
Secretary of the Treasury, so I'm asking you, what is your view? Will this bill increase or decrease the deficit?
It is my view that over the 10-year window, it will decrease.
You know, do you have anybody who agrees with you on this?
Yes, ma'am.
Let me ask my question.
Okay.
Every credible independent expert agrees that Trump and the Republicans' big, beautiful bill would add trillions of dollars to the national debt and would not even come close to paying for itself. The nonpartisan Congressional Budget Office, the Penn-Wharton budget model, and the Yale Budget Lab all agree on this, and they're looking at 10-year windows, thank you. So do the Conservative Tax Foundation and Committee for a Responsible Federal Budget, conservative groups. Even Elon Musk and the Wall Street Journal are criticizing the bill for ballooning the national debt. The only people who are saying publicly that it's not going to add to the national debt are you, Donald Trump, the Republicans in Congress. Do you have an independent group that has put forward numbers that disagrees with all of these conservative groups and disagrees with the Wall Street Journal on this?
Well, Senator, interesting to see you aligned with Elon Musk, but if I add...
You're no more shocked than I am.
If we want to take the full congressional budget scoring, they predict, and I don't agree with their methodology, they predict a $2.4 trillion deficit. But
okay, so the answer to the question is yes.
No, but may I finish? They include that, but they've also scored $2.8 trillion in tariff income. So even in Washington, D.C. math,
okay, so,
in Washington, D.C. math, that is a $400 billion surplus.
Okay, so let me make sure I understand. This bill, you admit, will increase the deficit by $2.4 trillion, but you think there will be another bill and another set of agreements that somehow materialize, haven't materialized so far, don't have any statutory authority, but that will make up the difference. So the answer to the original question, will this bill increase or decrease the deficit? I think you just said it will increase. This bill increases the deficit.
I want to use all the CBO scoring, and you can't take one without the other. I don't agree with the CBO.
One is the law that we are scoring, the bill that is in front of us. We don't have a tariff bill in front of us to score. Mr. Secretary, let me go on to the second question. You have said that government spending is, quote, out of control. You have also called government spending, quote, unsustainable. In fact, in the name of fiscal responsibility, you're working with the Republicans on this big, beautiful bill to pass the biggest cuts to Medicaid and the Affordable Care Act in American history. So, Mr. Secretary, help me understand here. Why is the national debt so very important that you're trying to kick 16 million people off their health insurance, but increasing the national debt doesn't seem to matter if you're cutting taxes for billionaires and billionaire corporations?
Well, first of all, a huge portion of this goes to family-owned businesses that are pass-through entities that are below that level, Senator, and I am sure you share my goals of Main Street prosperity.
You know, I'm glad to do tax cuts for people of modest means. The question I'm asking is, why does the deficit not matter to you? We're talking about knocking 16 million people off their health care, but it matters not, it does matter to you if we're knocking people off their health care, but not.
Well, first of all, that figure is overstated by 5.1 million. That is amount not attributable to provisions in this bill.
So you think it's okay just to knock 10 million people off their health care?
First of all, let's set that straight. Work requirements account for 8 million of CBO's claim number. Again, we're creating an economy that promotes and rewards.
It's clear, Secretary Bessent, that you don't want to answer the question.
No, Senator, I am answering it.
No, you're not.
And what I want is for Medicaid to be used for mothers and children as it was meant, not for 1.4 million illegal aliens, not for able-bodied people.
Medicaid is not used for people who are not documented. Mr. Chairman, I just want to say here, the part that troubles me the most is that the Secretary is deeply worried about the deficit and is willing to knock 16 million, or as he says, merely 11 million people off their health care matters so much. But it doesn't matter so much if you're cutting taxes for billionaires. Then it's okay to run up a big deficit. I think that's wrong.
We do have some differences of opinion. However, we also have a time crunch. I'm going to ask the remaining.
Ranking Member Warren.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, Mr. Traynor, if you're confirmed, you'll be responsible for enforcing the nation's laws barring discrimination in housing. HUD's website says that the office you would lead, the Office of Fair Housing and Equal Opportunity, quote, works to eliminate housing discrimination and promote civil rights and economic opportunity through housing. Last year, there were more than 34,000 complaints to the Fair Housing Office, the most on record in history. That suggests to me there is a problem nationally with housing discrimination. Mr. Traynor, you describe yourself as a civil rights lawyer, so I just want to go through your record on civil rights. In 2021, you authored a book review entitled, quote, George Floyd and the Rise of the Rival Constitution, where you appeared to agree with arguments that our civil rights laws contributed to the rise of a, quote, rival constitution that threatens our actual Constitution. In a 2022 report to the U.S. Commission on Civil Rights on Racial Disparities in Evictions in New York State, you wrote that while you, quote, do not doubt good faith views that racial discrimination many decades in the past somehow reveals itself today in New York's rental market, I do not share this view. Your current civil rights enforcement role at the Department of Education, you are being sued by the NAACP and other civil rights groups for advancing a, quote, legally flawed and unsupported interpretation of the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment to the Constitution. Mr. Traynor, given your record, why should we trust that you will fulfill the explicit mission of HUD's Fair Housing Office to, quote, eliminate housing discrimination and promote civil rights?
Senator, thank you for that question. I'd look at my career as a civil rights attorney who has represented hundreds upon hundreds of vulnerable New Yorkers in the worst time of their lives as being oftentimes the only person they can talk to help them navigate a deeply complex and at times unfair system. And that is exactly what I intend to do, is to take that experience and to evaluate complaints that come in, investigate that, and vigorously enforce the law if we find violations. There's no doubt about it.
That's the problem that I'm trying to probe here, Mr. Traynor. You're currently being sued by civil rights groups. You seem to have come to the conclusion that housing discrimination in New York's rental market does not exist. You've raised questions about the constitutionality of our civil rights laws. Your record is not indicative of someone who will faithfully uphold the civil rights laws. Instead, it reads like somebody who is hostile to the fundamental premise of civil rights. That makes me think you are just not a serious person for this job. So, Mr. Peters, I'd like to turn to you. As the Assistant Secretary for Export Enforcement, you would be on the front lines enforcing our export controls. Now, export controls are a crucial tool for ensuring that countries like China cannot access our most sensitive technologies and ultimately use them against us. So in February, Senator Hawley and I wrote to the Commerce Department to express our concern that BIS hadn't closed loopholes allowing PRC to acquire millions of advanced AI chips. Last month, Senator Banks and I wrote to NVIDIA to emphasize our concerns that its new R&D facility in Shanghai could lead to the diversion of advanced chips. Mr. Peters, do you agree that we need to impose robust safeguards to ensure that countries like Saudi Arabia and the UAE do not simply take our chips and pass them along to China?
Senator Warren, thank you for your question, and I appreciated the opportunity to meet with members of your staff in anticipation of this hearing. As I'm sure you're aware, BIS essentially is divided into two components. There is the enforcement side, which I hope to lead. There is also the administrative side, which has the primary responsibility for rulemaking and policy. I view my role, should I be confirmed, as committed to the aggressive enforcement.
Okay, I'm sorry, but I had a very specific question here. Do you agree that we need to impose robust safeguards to ensure that countries like Saudi Arabia and the UAE don't simply take our chips and then pass them along to China?
I agree, Senator Warren, that we need to be committed to vigorous enforcement of export control laws.
Is that a yes or is that a no?
Senator Warren, I believe vigorous.
Is that a yes or is that a no?
Senator Warren, I understand why you would like to reduce this to a yes or no issue.
Yeah, it's actually pretty simple, that we need to worry about countries like Saudi Arabia taking the chips from us and then passing them along to China. I get that we don't send the chips directly to China, but I'm very concerned about handing them to a country that in turn hands them to China. And I just want to know if you're worried about that as well.
Senator Warren, transshipment of technologies is already part of our enforcement mechanism.
I understand that. So can you answer this question then with a yes?
I can answer that. I would be vigorous. I will aggressively enforce the law.
All right. I think that I'm not going to get an answer here.
Thank you both.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank
Chairman.
you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. So, Chair Powell, the Fed released its updated economic projections last week, and I appreciate your summary, but I want to look at the trend lines here. The Fed's outlook on inflation, the labor market, and GDP growth have all gotten worse. Compared to your economic projections in December, the latest numbers show that the Fed is now projecting higher inflation, from 2.5% in December now to 3.1%. Higher unemployment from 4.3% to 4.5%. Lower economic growth from 2.1% projected just 6 months ago to 1.4% that you're now projecting. Chair Powell, what has changed in the last 6 months that has caused the Fed to forecast substantially higher inflation, somewhat higher unemployment, and lower economic growth than you did in December?
So some of it is just taking signal from data reports that we've seen. Some of it is people working in the possible effects in the short term of tariffs. We have no view on the wisdom or the longer term effects of trade policy. It's not our job. And by the way, I should add, our forecasts are generally, and in this case, are very, very similar to what outside forecasters
I understand that. I'm just using you as the gold standard here. I know it's consistent. But you mentioned tariffs as one of the things that has changed over the last 6 months. You know, Donald Trump has become president and the economy has headed down. Not only does the Fed data now show slower growth and higher prices this year, it sees slower growth and higher prices over the next 2 years as well. And the Fed sees no longer-term boost to the economy or drop in inflation. In other words, no upside to Trump's chaotic tariff war or his other economic policies. So let's talk for just a minute about what's under the hood of the Fed's economic forecast. Chair Powell, I know a lot of different factors influence the trajectory of interest rates. Is one of those factors how quickly the federal debt grows relative to the growth in the economy?
Not directly, no. We don't look at that as a factor that helps us set monetary policy.
So you're not watching the ratio between the amount of the federal debt and the growth in the economy?
No.
How fast the debt is growing and how fast the economy is growing? I think I have quotes from you saying last year, quote, we don't need to pay the debt down. We don't need to balance the budget. We just need the economy to grow faster than the debt. Are you saying something different from that now?
No, when asked and pressed, I pretty much always say the same thing as my predecessors, which is that we're on an unsustainable path. I would not say, though, that we do. I will say this: we do not look at federal financial policy and deficits as something that affects our month-to-month monetary policy decisions.
I'm trying to get the overall projection of what happens in the economy. So, for example, I think you have made the point that if we spend on things like childcare that can boost labor participation and GDP, that may be a time when you offset the debt that you incur to do that. But if there aren't investments like that, and we are simply running up the debt, what's the impact of increasing the national debt? So I understand that you don't comment on fiscal policy, but it does affect your job, which is keeping inflation under control and also maximizing employment. If certain policies would materially drive up the national debt and increase the debt to GDP ratio over time, could that make it more likely that we would see inflation, all else being equal?
I mean, theoretically, sure, fiscal policy can add to inflation, but that's, again, that's really not something we comment on. We try to stay away from fiscal policy.
I understand you don't comment on it, but I do appreciate your acknowledgement of the math here. You know, the Joint Committee on Taxation projects the one big, beautiful bill would increase federal deficits by $4.2 trillion. According to analysis by the Congressional Budget Office and the Yale Budget Lab, the bill raises the debt to GDP by 24 percentage points. It slows economic growth, it increases inflation, and it reduces real wages. So two of Trump's signature policies, his tariffs and his tax bill, will increase costs for American families. When America borrows money, it should be for investments that Americans need, like investments in childcare or housing or healthcare that would actually boost economic growth and lower costs. America should not take away healthcare from millions of people who need it and then borrow trillions of dollars just so that a handful of billionaires and giant corporations can get even richer. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So President Trump has deployed the National Guard and then the U.S. Marines to Los Angeles over the objections of state and local officials, saying that the troops are needed to support immigration detention operations that are being carried out by ICE. On Sunday night, the president threatened to deploy ICE agents to other cities around the country that he sees as, quote, the core of the Democrat power center, end quote, specifically mentioning Chicago and New York. Secretary Hegseth, if the president wanted to deploy Marines to Chicago and New York City like he did in Los Angeles, would you carry out that order even if the local governors and mayors objected?
Well, Senator, because Governor Newsom was unwilling to address
That's not my
protecting
question.
federal law enforcement agents in Los Angeles, President Trump had all the authorities, and the Defense Department happily supported defending our ICE agents in the conduct of their job. They have the right as Americans to be able to do their job without being attacked by mobs. And we will protect them in that process. And if other states needed it, we would provide that.
I know that you heard my question. So you would be willing to send troops if the president ordered it to Chicago, New York City? That's right.
Well, thankfully, New York City, unlike California, unlike Gavin Newsom, is willing to step up and address the issue with their local law
I will
enforcement.
take that as a yes. How about if the president says he wants to send troops to 15 cities? Would you be willing to do that?
Senator, I don't accept your hypothetical because it's
That's a hypothetical.
Not a real
That's
one.
the question. You're the Secretary of Defense. Would you send troops to 15 cities if the president said do it? Would you do it? 15 cities.
Again, Senator, it's a complete hypothetical lacking any context
Look,
at all.
You're the Secretary
and I refuse
of
to box
Defense.
myself in based on
Well, you
questioning
can
on a
refuse,
hypothetical.
But you're here asking for $1 trillion, and I want to know how you're going to spend it. And so my question is, if Donald Trump tells you to send troops to 15 American cities, are you going to spend the money and send the troops?
Thankfully, we're spending money on securing our southern border, a way the previous administration abandoned and allowed
Okay, so you're
21
not gonna
million
answer
illegals to
that
enter our
question
country. So
anyway.
defending our homeland is a real serious priority under this administration, and we're doing
I
it.
understand the question about defense. Secretary Hegseth, about 4,000 National Guard troops and 700 Marines have been sent to L.A. Is there a number of troops deployed to American cities over the objections of governors and mayors at which you would be concerned that we are undermining our national defense?
Senator, we've spent 2 decades guarding other people's borders. We think at the Defense Department it's about time we shore up ours.
So that's my question. Is there a number at which sending those troops to Los Angeles or Chicago or New York starts to undermine our ability to defend ourselves around the globe? Is there a number?
Senator, we look at capabilities and readiness around the globe all the time, and we're quite satisfied with our capabilities to defend the homeland, and we'll provide more if and when it's necessary.
So you are satisfied with our capabilities. Let me just ask, have you actually done the analysis and figured out how many troops you can deploy domestically before you start to undermine readiness around the world? Have you done that analysis?
Yes, ma'am.
Then would you let the rest of us in on it? We are the Senate Armed Services Committee, and you're here to ask for $1 trillion. What's the number?
We've got contingencies and plans for any number of capabilities should governors be unable, as Gavin Newsom has been, to actually secure his own federal agents in their cities.
How many troops can you deploy domestically before you start to cut into our readiness internationally?
As I said, previous administrations deployed our National Guard all around the globe in numbers far beyond what we were capable of supporting. So limited contingencies inside the United States to protect federal law enforcement is doable.
If the Supreme Court orders you to remove troops from American city streets, will you do so?
Can you repeat the question, please?
Yes. If the Supreme Court orders you to remove troops from American cities, will you do so?
As I've said, Senator, I don't believe district courts should determine national security policy, but if the Supreme Court rules on a topic, we will abide by that.
Okay. You know, during her press conference last week, Secretary Nome said, "We are staying here to liberate the city from its mayor and its governor, people who were elected by a majority of voters." Secretary Hegseth is saying he is ready to deploy more troops and won't tell us what the implications are for our national defense. This is un-American, and it makes us unsafe. I wish our Republican colleagues would speak up. Thank you, Senator Hagerty. On behalf of the chairman, I now recognize myself. We need to make sure that any new legislation to regulate crypto market doesn't do more harm than good. And there are a couple of areas where I think we need to be very careful not to make things worse. First, we cannot pass any legislation that eats away at the SEC's current jurisdiction to regulate traditional securities. Now, Mr. Massad, you were chair of the CFTC and you were Assistant Secretary for Treasury for Financial Stability. Could market structure legislation make it possible to structure a non-crypto product so that it dodges our security laws? Use something like Tesla stock as an example.
Yes, it certainly could. If you, for example, provide an exemption for activity on decentralized trading protocols, and that's a very broad exemption, then you could tokenize Tesla stock and have it traded on that protocol, and it could be exempt then from 34 Act trading requirements at least.
So in effect, we start to repeal the SEC as we've had it for traditional.
It could certainly undermine their authority substantially.
It's critical that any crypto regulation bill we pass does not have massive unintended consequences. And I think those are unintended consequences for everyone, but consequences that would reach far beyond the crypto market and take a tire iron to the $120 trillion golden egg that is America's capital markets. So I think it's an important note we have to do in regulation here. There's another problem that we've got to face, and that's corruption. President Trump has made it impossible to have a conversation about crypto legislation that does not address his most successful grift. According to a recent New York Times analysis of the president's financial disclosure, crypto is now the biggest source of President Trump's wealth. In the past 7 months, he has become the most successful president in history at making money off his time in the Oval Office, and he's done it using crypto. Now, Mr. Painter, if Congress passes a bill creating a new federal regulatory framework for the crypto market, what will happen to the crypto market? Is it likely to grow?
It will grow substantially.
Okay, and what will that do to the value of President Trump's meme coin?
It will make him very rich, even richer than he already is.
And what about the value of his stable coin and his son's Bitcoin mining operation and his family's crypto holdings?
The same. The Trump family will become very, very wealthy as the prices go up and the bubble rises.
So if we create a new federal regulatory framework for the crypto market, the president and his family stand to make a whole lot more money. So, Mr. Painter, if the president and his family own billions of dollars in crypto, if Congress passes a crypto bill, who will claim the power to appoint and the power to fire the regulators that will implement whatever new rules are put in place governing crypto holdings?
The President of the United States, and he is now also claiming the power to fire the members of independent commissions, and that will include the Commodities Futures Trading Commission and the SEC.
Okay, so you were President Bush's chief ethics counsel. Can you think of another time in American history when a president of the United States held such power over regulators, the very regulators who would determine the value of the president's own net worth?
Never. We have never had, since the Civil War, a president of the United States with substantial financial holdings that are conflicted with any official duties. This is unheard of. And now it's not just real estate, but Donald Trump recently is into crypto, even though he said that it was a scam just a few years ago. He's now into crypto and into social media industries he did not have in his first administration.
Well, we need clear and strong rules for the crypto market, but the proposals I've seen so far undercut the investor protections in our traditional capital markets. They harm our national security, and they supercharge the value of President Trump's crypto grift. We need crypto regulations that actually regulate the industry. We don't need another giveaway to a handful of billionaire insiders. And with that, I conclude and not only call on Senator Britt, but hand the gavel to you.
Very much, Senator Budd. Senator Warren.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and congratulations to all of our nominees. In 1983, Congress created the Director of Operational Test and Evaluation Office to provide the Secretary of Defense and Congress with the unvarnished truth about the weapons we buy and whether they actually work. The reason for that bill was because the military had been caught trying to cover up major problems, like that the Bradley fighting vehicle would, quote, burn its crew to death if it were hit by a single Soviet anti-tank missile. Now, Dr. Henninger, if you are confirmed to lead the testing office, it will be your job to make sure that similar problems are brought to light and fixed. And this is important because service members' lives are at stake here. But Secretary Hegseth has issued a memo reducing the staff by 74% and its budget by 80%. This is a dangerous decision, and I have serious concerns about whether you will have the resources you need to accomplish your safety mission. So, Dr. Henninger, will you promise to come to this committee and tell the public if your test results show that a system is unsafe or doesn't work, or if you don't have the resources to tell one way or the other about whether a system is safe and operational or not?
Thank you for that question, Senator Warren. Our reports will always reflect any limitations or assumptions that we encountered in operational test and evaluation. And of course, I will always come before you and tell the truth. So all those things taken together, that's an affirmative yes.
Well, I appreciate that. Having the courage to speak truth to power is a big part of what this office is all about. You know, this is very personal for me, Dr. Henninger. This office is the one that raised the alarm about safety concerns on the V-22, and those warnings were ignored, and 2 of my constituents died. You need to be the watchdog that barks. Now, One of your major tools is your annual report. Under the Biden administration, there was pressure on the testing office to hide problems through designations like controlled unclassified information. The information isn't classified, but those blank spots, blackouts in the report keep the public in the dark about a tank that gets so hot that it burns soldiers' hands, or the risk that a pilot ejecting from an F-35 will have their neck snapped. So, Dr. Henninger, if you are confirmed, do you promise to ensure that the testing office's reports inform the public as much as possible about the problems that we need to fix in order to make sure that our weapons are safe?
Yes, Senator, to the maximum extent possible.
Okay, I will hold you to that. Now, one of your other tools is your oversight list, which identifies which programs should receive scrutiny from your office. Congress plays a key role in providing oversight of these programs as well, as you know. And in the past, your office has agreed to add programs that Congress identifies to your list, so they will be sure to be scrutinized. Dr. Henninger, if you're confirmed, will you commit to continue to support your office conducting oversight on programs that Congress requests?
Thank you, Senator Warren. I will always conform with all the laws and regulations that govern my role, if confirmed. And if Congress legislates the oversight list, then I will absolutely.
Okay, I have to say that's the wrong answer. This is not one where the question is, if we legislate, will you follow the law? Well, yes. I mean, that should be a given. I don't think I should have to ask that. The question is, if we request oversight of a particular company or a particular effort that is going forward, our constitutional responsibility is oversight, and in many ways, you are our eyes and ears out there. I want a commitment from you that if we're requesting oversight, that you will, in fact, put that company or put that program on your oversight list. Can I get that commitment?
Senator, we all want the oversight list to reflect the programs or records that will best serve our missions and keep our warfighters safe and our taxpayers apprised. And I will take all suggestions with a wide net. I'll cast a wide net, take everybody's suggestions who have something to offer, and do an analysis of what should be on the oversight list, yes.
Okay, it's a better answer than the first one, but not a great answer here. Look, ensuring the safety of our service members means standing up for transparency and against any pressure that would compromise the integrity of the testing process. That's all I'm looking for here. And the Senate National Defense Authorization Act goes a long way to push back on misguided efforts to reduce essential oversight. I look forward to working with the chairman and all of my colleagues on getting that done. But we really need you committed to overseeing and being transparent about what you have seen in the testing programs. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I apologize for going.
Well,
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, Congress is deeply worried about the opioid crisis and mental health issues. So last year, we allocated more than $7 billion for the prevention and treatment of these conditions. Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. heads the Department of Health and Human Services, which is charged by law with administering that funding through the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, SAMHSA. Mr. Stewart, if confirmed, you will be the top lawyer at HHS advising Secretary Kennedy. So let's do a little law so that we can understand what kind of advice you would give to the Secretary. 42 U.S.C. 300X-55 says, HHS shall terminate SAMHSA grants only if, quote, a state has materially failed to comply with the agreements or other conditions required for the receipt of the grant. That is the only condition under which Congress says these grants can be canceled. So, Mr. Stewart, let's start easy. I've read you the statutory language. Can Secretary Kennedy wake up in a bad mood one morning and simply say to the worker who is running a suicide hotline, I don't like your face, I'm canceling your state's grant money.
Well, let me first respond by saying thank you very much for the opportunity, and I look forward to working with you in the future. I did receive your letter.
I appreciate that, but we're very limited on time. Would
Sure.
that be legal?
What I can tell you is that in every instance, I'll give the advice of complying with the law.
No, that's not the question I asked. I'm asking you, if Secretary Kennedy wakes up in a bad mood one morning, can he say to somebody, I don't like your face, so I'm canceling your state's SAMHSA grant?
Well, what I'd like to do is review the code and all the code provisions.
I just read you the code language. Did you have any problem understanding it? A state, you can only do cancellation if a state has materially failed to comply with the agreements or other conditions required for the receipt of the grant. That's all it says.
The key words, though, are the agreements and the terms of those.
You think there's an agreement out there that says that the secretary can cancel a grant because I don't like your face?
No, so I think that, so I don't believe that's been the case. I don't believe that's ever happened.
I have no reason. I'm asking you about the legal advice you will give. And I want to understand under a statute that says these are the only conditions under which a grant can be canceled. Do you think Secretary Kennedy can say, I don't like your face, so I'm canceling your grant?
So accepting that term, I don't like your face, what I'm telling you is that the terms and conditions of those agreements matter. And so we have to review those.
I don't think any of them say, I don't like your face.
No, I agree with you on this, but I haven't heard Secretary.
Look, we're 3 minutes into this. Can I just have a, yeah, that would be illegal?
That you can't cancel a contract, to my knowledge, because you don't like somebody's face.
Okay, let's do a second one. What if Secretary Kennedy wakes up in a bad mood and he said, I heard you're a Republican, and it turns out I really don't like Republicans, so I'm going to cancel your grant for your addiction treatment center. You think that would be legal?
Secretary, I think that there's a formula to review these things. I believe Secretary Kennedy would go to council and ask for these things.
Them. I'm asking if the secretary wanted to do that, he wanted to cancel all the grants that are held by Republicans, would that be legal?
My advice would be to follow the rules and the laws with respect to every one of these.
You are the one who's supposed to tell him how to interpret a statute that says the only conditions are if the state is not meeting the terms of the contract.
We've got to meet the terms of the contract. If they're outside the terms of the contract, it can be canceled.
Okay, so can he cancel because you're a Republican?
If it's not included in the terms of the contract, no.
Bingo. Okay, so the answer is that would be illegal, right? How about the third one? Your work is no longer necessary. Your state's grant is canceled. Let's just say there's nothing in the contract about whether the work is necessary. Would it be illegal to cancel the grant under those conditions?
That's not as easy a question as simply saying yes or no. Well, listen, we've got to be able to look in terms of the intent of these contracts as well.
No, that's not what the statute says. And you are the lawyer who is giving advice to Secretary Kennedy. And so I want to know, as the person who gives advice, when you read statutory language that says there's only one condition under which you can do this, and that is if the state has materially failed to comply with the agreements or other conditions, that you can cancel the grant. And by the way, you have to give notice in a hearing for doing that. Can he wake up and say, we decided we don't need you anymore?
My advice
if that's not in the grant.
My advice will always be to follow the terms and agreements.
So in this case, you would say, you can't do that, Mr. Secretary.
I will give the advice to follow the terms of both the code and those agreements.
And if the contract doesn't say that, you will tell the secretary not to do it.
In every instance, we will follow the terms and conditions and make sure we follow the code.
Well, I really hope you do follow the terms and conditions in the agreement, because that is exactly the letter that Secretary Kennedy sent, canceling projects all over this country, and the only grounds he gave were grounds that are not in the contract and clearly in violation of the law. So I hope, Mr. Stewart, based on what you've said, you will deliver that message to Secretary Kennedy and give advice that is consistent with the law in the future. Thank you.
Let me just...
Thank you. And Senator Young.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So last November, while you were under consideration to become Secretary of Health and Human Services, Mr. Kennedy, you said, quote, if vaccines are working for somebody, I'm not going to take them away. No exceptions, no ifs, ands, or buts. You would not take away vaccines from anyone who wanted them. Then last week, you announced that the COVID-19 vaccine is no longer approved for healthy people under the age of 65. In announcing the change, you said the vaccine will be available for anyone who wants it. Now, obviously, both things cannot be true at the same moment. So let's clear this up right now, Secretary Kennedy. Will you tell America that all adults and all children over 6 months of age are eligible to get a COVID booster at their local pharmacy today?
Anybody can get the booster.
I'm sorry?
Anybody can get it, Senator.
Anybody. So you're saying that is now the official rule of HHS. Anybody is eligible to get a booster by just walking into the pharmacy.
It's not recommended for healthy people.
No. If you don't recommend, then the consequence of that in many states is that you can't walk into a pharmacy and get one. It means insurance companies don't have to cover the $200 or so cost. As Senator Dr. Cassidy said, you are effectively denying people vaccines.
We're not going to recommend a product for which there's no clinical data for that indication. Is that what I should be doing?
What you should be doing is honoring your promise that you made when you were looking to get confirmed in this job.
You're going like this.
And that is, you promised that you would not take away vaccines from anyone who wanted them. You just changed the classification of the COVID vaccine.
I'm not taking them away from people, Senator.
It takes it away if you can't get it from your pharmacist.
Well, most Americans are going to be able to get it from their pharmacy for free. Most Americans will be able to get it from their pharmacy for free.
The question is everyone who wants it. That was your promise.
I never promised that I was going to recommend products for which there is no indication.
When you said...
And I know you've taken $855,000 from pharmaceutical companies, Senator.
Did you hold up a big sign saying that you were lying when you said that? Because you are the one who said you would not take them away. Now, Senator Kennedy,
I'm not taking them away from anybody.
Secretary,
you want me to indicate a product for which there is no clinical data?
Senator,
is that what you want?
Secretary Kennedy, you said you wouldn't, and now you did.
I'm not taking them away. Everybody can get access to them.
No, they can't walk into a pharmacy the way they could last month and get access.
It depends on the state. It depends on the states.
A year ago,
but they can still get it. Everybody can get it. Everybody can get it, Senator.
So look, let's move on. You clearly are taking away vaccines. I've seen the list for what's coming up next, and that is the agenda for the next CDC vaccine panel. And first up is ratifying your COVID actions. Second is hepatitis B is on the agenda. So should Americans expect you to take away hepatitis vaccine access as well, even though you promised not to?
As I said, I'm not taking vaccines away from anybody.
Okay, same answer, right? You're just going to deny that when people can't get access, that you're not taking it away. Then let me ask you, is that the same game you're going to play with me?
You want me to recommend every product in the world?
No,
so that without any clinical trial data.
Through on your promises.
Yeah, my promise was to give.
A month ago, we could get COVID vaccines by just walking.
You can still get COVID vaccines, Senator.
You are taking that away.
No, you are still. You can still get the COVID vaccines, and Medicare will still pay for them, and Medicaid will still pay for them.
Tell the head of the CDC that if she refused to sign off on your changes to the childhood vaccine schedule, that she had to resign.
No, I told her that she had to resign because I asked her, are you a trustworthy person? And she said no. So if you had an employee who told you they weren't trustworthy, would you ask them to resign, Senator?
So I'm sorry, but this is not what she has said publicly. She has said
I'm not surprised about that.
So you're saying she's lying?
Yes. Every conversation I had with her, there were witnesses.
Let me get this straight. This is the same person that less than a month earlier, you stood next to her and described her as unimpeachable, and you had full confidence in her, and that you had full confidence in her scientific credentials. And in a month, she became a liar?
Yeah, you should ask her what changed. And by the way, a month ago, you were voting against her. Oh, because you thought she was either incompetent, ineligible, or unsuited to the task.
I voted against her because I was afraid she was going to bend the knee to you and Donald Trump. And it looks like she didn't bend the knee, so you fired her. Look, you're putting America's babies' health at risk, America's seniors' health at risk, all Americans' health at risk, and you should resign.
Senator Sanders.
Ranking Member Warren.
So thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Mr. Chairman, I agree with you. I think the independence of the Fed is absolutely paramount. But we cannot ignore the elephant in the room, and that is that President Trump has launched an all-out assault on the independence of the Federal Reserve. Dr. Myron has said that, quote, to pretend that one can easily shift between highly political and allegedly non-political roles without letting political biases inform policy is at best naive and at worst sinister. So that's what you're about to do, go from a highly political role to a non-political role. And since you describe how you'll be informed by your political biases, I think the American people have a right to understand just how independent you are or are not. So let's measure that a little bit. Dr. Myron, let's start with an easy question to show that you have some independence from the president. Easy yes or no. Did Donald Trump lose the 2020 presidential election?
Probably have to.
No, it's a yes or no.
Microphone on, please.
Pull the microphone.
Come on, and the chair is going to be tough on time. I just need a yes or no. Did Donald Trump lose the 2020 presidential election?
Thank you, Senator Warren. Joe Biden was certified by Congress as the president of the United States.
Right. So did Donald Trump lose that election?
As I just said, Joe Biden was certified by
Donald
the
Trump
Congress.
lose that election? Can you say the words Donald Trump lost that election? Are you independent enough to say that?
The Congress certified Joe Biden as president
All
of the
right.
United States.
So that was one. Let's try another. Let me ask you another question here. The Federal Reserve relies on accurate and unbiased data to make monetary policy, including data produced by the Bureau of Labor Statistics. President Trump recently fired the BLS commissioner, alleging that she, quote, faked the jobs numbers before the election to try and boost Kamala's chances of victory. Do you agree with President Trump that the BLS published fake numbers to manipulate the outcome of the 2024 presidential election?
Thank you for the question, Ranking Member Warren. Look, the data quality from the Bureau of
That's
Labor
not the
Statistics.
question about the data quality. Did, as President Trump said, the BLS publish fake numbers to manipulate the outcome of the 2024 presidential election? This is what President Trump said. Is he right? You're the head of the Council of Economic Advisors.
The Bureau of Labor Statistics data on various measures has deteriorated steadily in quality over time.
I understand that you may have questions about the data quality, but I want to remind you that when the data seemed to show that Donald Trump's jobs numbers were doing well, I didn't hear you say a single word about problems with data quality. The only time you started questioning data quality was when the numbers started showing that Trump's economy was headed in the wrong direction. So let me ask you the question for the third time. We want to understand your independence. Donald Trump stated that the BLS faked the job numbers before the election to try and boost Kamala's chances of victory. Do you agree with that, yes or no?
The Bureau of Labor Statistics did not take corrective action to improve the quality of steadily
Do you
deteriorating
agree
data.
with the statement that they faked numbers?
I believe that they were complacently allowing the data to
Do
continue
you
to
have
deteriorate
any
in quality.
evidence that they faked numbers?
Well, as I said moments ago, the data have steadily deteriorated in quality, and I'm happy
Okay,
to
in
give
other
some
words,
examples
just
of how
two
that has happened.
straightforward questions about your independence, and you've blown both of them. So let's shift to the inflation caused by President's economic policies, which you've had a key role in designing. You've claimed, for example, that consumers thus far have not seen any material macroeconomic increase from tariffs at all. Your statement. The numbers do not back you up. Since January, cost of groceries is up, cost of utilities is up, cost of housing is up, cost of back-to-school shoes is up, cost of backpacks and baby strollers up. Dr. Myron, the data say that costs for basic necessities are going up. But it's not just the reported numbers. Fed Governor Waller, who President Trump appointed, private sector forecasters, small businesses, and families are all telling us that the costs are up. Do you think those families and data experts are lying?
Senator, thank you for the question. I believe your question is conflating relative price increases with inflation, which is an increase in the aggregate price level. There has been no detectable increase in the aggregate price level as a result of tariffs.
You know,
there have
Dr.
been relative
Myron,
price changes,
you
as
have
there
made
always are.
clear that you will do or say whatever Donald Trump wants you to do or say, and that may work in a political position, but it takes an axe to Fed independence and will make life far more expensive for American families. I apologize for going over. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So Donald Trump's big, beautiful bill raises costs for families all across this country while handing out giant tax breaks to billionaire corporations. So here we have Mark Zuckerberg and Jeff Bezos getting billions of dollars in tax breaks, paid for by kicking 15 million Americans off their health care and raising health care costs for millions more. One of the most ridiculous tax breaks in this bill is called retroactive research and experimentation expensing. Let's use plain English on this. This is money to incentivize research that corporations like Meta and Amazon conducted years ago. We're going to give them a break now to incentivize them for things they did a long time ago. So, because of Trump's horrible bill, the federal government will hand $67 billion in these tax breaks to giant corporations next year. Now, Mr. Korb, as IRS chief counsel, you would be in charge of drafting the guidance and regulations that will determine whether or not these corporate tax breaks stay at $67 billion, or depending on how you write it, get even more valuable. And given that you have spent the past 15 years and beyond representing Fortune 500 companies in tax disputes with the IRS, your work could directly affect your former clients' bottom line. So, Mr. Korb, help me understand. How does handing out billions of dollars to corporations for research they already did lower costs for American families?
Thank you for that question. I'd also like to thank you for the meeting yesterday, and I will let you know granddaughter Anna really appreciated your signature.
Glad to hear.
I don't want to take up more of your time. You understand. Keep in mind that the chief counsel is responsible for administering the tax law. It's the U.S. Congress that is responsible for enacting the tax law.
Okay, so you're saying I don't have to answer this question, not my job. But Mr. Korb, you were IRS chief counsel for President Bush. You know that the IRS chief counsel has a central role in determining how these laws are implemented through regulations and guidance. This is where the action is. So I'm going to ask one more time, how is a tax break for research that's already been done anything other than a huge windfall for corporate America?
Thank you, Senator, for that question. While I do have some experience, what we used to refer to as the R&D tax credit during my many years of practice, I have to admit I've not drilled down on what is in this bill on that point. So
okay, well, let me try another.
I can't give you any view at this point.
Let me try another then. The tax giveaways in the big, beautiful bill are so large that massive corporations across America are going to see their tax bills drop dramatically. According to one estimate, Amazon, for example, is set to pocket over $15 billion this year alone. Meta will get $11 billion this year alone. Now, there is one backstop, and that is back in 2022, Democrats created a corporate minimum tax that prevents billionaire corporations from paying a tax rate lower than 15%. Already, corporations are trying to wiggle out of it by lobbying the Trump Treasury Department and the IRS to write weaker rules. Now, Mr. Korb, the corporate minimum tax is the law of the land, just like the big, beautiful bill. When billionaire corporations see their tax rates drop below 15%, because Trump and the Republicans gave them all these tax cuts, will you commit that you will not write new rules that let them out of paying the corporate alternative minimum tax?
Thank you for that question, Senator. And I do commit to follow the law that you as the Congress enacted in writing the regulations.
So let me make sure I understand your answer to this, because if anyone should be able to commit to following the law, it should be a person in this job. Does that mean you will commit to implementing and enforcing the corporate minimum tax as required by statute? Or do you believe these corporations are above the law?
Again, I have not studied the latest iteration of this. We've been through corporate minimum taxes, alternative minimum taxes, back to the 86 Act and beyond, and it keeps changing, okay? I do have a day job, so I've not studied every element of this bill. I apologize for that. Are there, in that particular statutory provision, is there authority given to the Treasury to write regulations?
Yes.
Okay. So that's what you're talking about. Okay. Again, keep in mind, tax policy is the job of the Treasury. As chief counsel, our lawyers work hand in glove with the Treasury lawyers to do that. And I will be involved in approving regulations, no question about it. And so probably I should not offer a view at this point in time, since I'm not up to speed yet.
Well, I just want to say, I'm over time, so I'm going to quit here, but I think it is wrong for the Trump administration to be handing out literally tens of billions of dollars to these giant profitable corporations, and you will be in a position to give them even more. And I am uncomfortable with the way I feel like you've dodged the answers to these questions. I want to hear that we're going to hold people at least to what the law specifically requires of them, even if they are billionaire corporations. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Warren.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So President Trump promised that he would lower costs for American families on day one. Those were his words, on day one. Instead, he is prioritizing a $40 billion bailout for Argentina and the wealthy hedge fund investors, starting with $20 billion in taxpayer money and $20 billion more fronted by U.S. banks, potentially guaranteed by taxpayers, and who knows, maybe even more money going to Argentina. Now, this bailout came after Argentina cut a deal with China that directly undercuts American soybean farmers. Under Trump, farm bankruptcies are surging, crop prices are falling, and Trump's chaotic tariffs are making fertilizer and farming equipment more expensive. But instead of helping American farmers who clearly need that help, he's helping the farmers in Argentina. So don't take my word for it. Listen to the farmers themselves. One soybean farmer said, quote, "I turn on the news and we gave $20 billion of taxpayer money to Argentina, my competition." The American Soybean Association said plainly, quote, "The frustration is overwhelming." So, Dr. Callahan, you're being nominated to serve as America's chief agricultural negotiator. Do you agree that bailing out Argentina while our own farmers are struggling is a betrayal of the American soybean farmer?
Thank you, Senator Warren.
In our negotiations for agreements on reciprocal trade, soy is a top commodity that we are negotiating around the world to ensure that countries around the world have access to high-quality U.S. soybeans.
So, I appreciate that. I don't mean to interrupt, but we're going to be limited on our time here. It's an easy question. I'm asking you if you agree with American soybean farmers themselves, whose interests you are supposed to represent in this job, and they are ringing the alarm about their own economic livelihoods. Surging farm bankruptcies, soybean farmers losing access to key markets when we prop up these competitors. So I just don't understand. If you can't acknowledge that there is a problem here, how do you represent American soybean farmers?
Thank you, Senator Warren. And in my role as the Assistant USTR for Agriculture, and if confirmed as the Chief Agricultural Negotiator, I will have the interests of U.S. farmers and ranchers.
Can you acknowledge that there is a serious problem right now for those soybean farmers?
Our current negotiations are making good on the promise to U.S. farmers and ranchers to reset our trade relationships.
So I'm sorry, you can't even acknowledge that our American soybean farmers are having trouble right now? Is that what you're telling me?
Oh,
you're just going to sit there and say, nope, we're working.
China's weaponization of agriculture has absolutely harmed U.S. soybean farmers, and
so farmers are in trouble because China quit buying from them. Because who is China buying from right now? What's that country?
China is purchasing from every country
except the United States. What country is China buying soybeans from right now? What's the name of that country?
China
Dr.
purchases
Callahan,
many
what is the name of the country China is buying soybeans from right now?
China is purchasing Latin American soybeans. As of this morning,
what is
they
the
are
name of the
purchasing U.S.
particular
soybeans
country
as well.
they are buying soybeans from? If you can't answer that question, I don't see how you can represent American soybean farmers. Dr. Callahan, let me ask you about another constituency that you supposedly would be fighting for, and that's cattle ranchers. So Trump bails out Argentina. He undercuts American soybean farmers. What's next? He announces he's raising the quota for Argentine beef imports. Now, importing Argentine beef will devastate small ranchers, but with the big four meatpacking corporations controlling the market, consumers are not going to see prices that are any lower. So once again, Trump is helping Argentina while American ranchers and American consumers pay the price. One Illinois cattle producer called Trump's plan, quote, a betrayal of the American rancher, and said Trump is, quote, acting more like president of Argentina than president of the United States. So, Dr. Callahan, do you agree with the American cattle ranchers that importing beef from Argentina will harm them, particularly the small ranchers?
Thank you, Senator Warren. I am in close communication with U.S. cattlemen.
We're out of time. Can you just give me a yes or no on that? Do you understand that this will harm our small ranchers?
Thank you, Senator. I'm confident that the cattlemen understand that USTR,
yes
we are negotiating for their interests to open markets for U.S. beef.
Okay. Well, obviously I can't get an answer.
Thank you very much.